Rachel Zegler, thanks for coming on my show. I sold out years ago and I'm a coward. So you recently starred in the movie Snow White. Tell me, what was it like to play Snow Latina?
First of all, Stephen, it was weird. But I did enjoy reimagining the character as a woke Colombian woman who looks like a fish.
Well, I sold out years ago and I'm a coward. Are you surprised that everyone hates the movie?
Not at all. Society is far too racist and misogynist to appreciate the reimagining of a classic Disney princess as an ugly Colombian chick.
I sold out years ago and I'm a coward. You don't think making the movie a woke piece of garbage has anything to do with people hating it?
Not really. The original story had Snow White falling in love with the prince, but in the remake that's super weird and makes no sense. What kind of prince would fall for a woke Colombian woman who looks like a fish?
Wow. I sold out years ago and I'm a coward.
Thanks, Stephen. Excuse me. Hello? What's that? You have an idea for a movie that will save Disney's reputation? It's guaranteed to be a hit? And you want me to star in it? Come on, Stephen. Let's go see Bob Iger.
Thanks for coming, Rachel. This Snow White flop has unexpectedly tarnished the reputation of Disney. Who knew reimagining Snow White as a woke Colombian woman who resembles a fish would be so unappealing to audiences everywhere? But I have an idea for a movie that is certain to turn our bad luck around.
It sounds amazing. What is it?
I want to reimagine Hercules as a woke Colombian woman who looks like a fish.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
I sold out years ago and I'm a coward. I'll take that as a yes. We'll start production as soon as possible. I'm thinking we'll go balls out with the cast. In fact, we'll reimagine every character as a woke Colombian woman who looks like a fish. And because Rachel is the star, we'll sell out theaters everywhere.
Good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Viewers Discretion. I am your host, Joe Nierman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. 7 minutes. It's 7 after. Okay, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. How you all doing? It's been a minute. Been a minute since I've been on the YouTubes, on the interwebs. Some folks are talking about me, and it's my privilege and pleasure to bring to you all tonight one person who had my ears ringing today, had my ears burning. I was like, he invoking my name. He's invoking my name. He's invoking my name. He's always a friend, though, and that's why I bring him back to this show here. That is my good buddy, Uncivil Law. Welcome, Uncivil. How are you?
I'm doing reasonably well. How are you?
Okay. Are we going to be mixing it up? Are you going to be telling me how terrible I was on Friday or what?
Well, I'll certainly provide my own legal opinion to the extent it disagrees with yours. It might be an issue.
All right. That's good. That's good. Those of you who may not be familiar, I did make an appearance on Tim Pool's Culture War on Friday, at which point I was tangoing with an avowed leftist, admitted TDS sufferer. I think he would admit it. I mean, when you finish the conversation off by calling Trump a degenerate, I think you kind of had to say that perhaps your personal opinions of the man may be clouding you a little bit. So yeah, I think he's actually very, very clouded, and I felt as if a lot of times, as soon as I would start to make a point, he would feel a great need to cut me off and interject and tell me, and often either deflect or try to turn to Tim, and then just keep rolling. So he would just cut me off, and then but we'll talk about what actually happened on Friday during that conversation. But Uncivil here, my friend Uncivil, is not the only one who's here to set me right on all the wrongs that I errors of law that I spread across the interwebs on Friday. No. My favorite antagonist, the one who loves to try and call me out every time he thinks that I might have just misstated a word here and there, is of course, or if I'm just flat out in La La Land, is of course Nate the lawyer. How are you, brother?
What's going on, guys? How you guys doing? You guys looking good tonight.
Thank you. I've been slimming. I really have. It's the sort of thing I would say even if I had put on 10 pounds, but I really haven't.
Actually, as long as we're on the subject, I've lost something like 50 pounds in the last 3 months.
Holy moly!
That's a good weight. That's good weight.
So I'm making a lot of progress myself as well. So I'm very excited.
Beautiful. Wow. My target is to lose 50 pounds. You were bigger than me, but my target is to lose 50. So
Yeah, well, I still have like 130 pounds to go, so it's a long journey.
all right.
No,
You
good
know,
luck.
Good luck to you, brother. And
1 pound at a
continue-
time, brother.
That's right. That's right. All right. Do you guys want me to talk to you about the Tim Pool setup? What do you want me to talk to you about? Or do you want to just get right in and talk about where I butt heads and where you think that I just made
personally,
a mockery of the law?
Personally, I just like to confine myself to the one issue of the one guy and the green card holder, because I think the law might be different with respect to illegal aliens. I think it might be different with respect to visa card holders. So I'd really just like to stick to the issue of the green card holder and the rules that apply there, so we don't go
Fair
off
enough.
on other topics.
To give some background, those of you who not yet had an opportunity to watch my debate on Friday, I was debating a gentleman who goes by the name of Pisco. And he's a strong lefty, and the main topic was supposed to be Mahmoud Khalil. I want to just point out to you all something that I felt a little bit like, of all the topics for Tim to bring me on for, this was not exactly an area which I felt to be my strong suit. But if Tim Pool comes a knocking, I'm not going to say no. So I actually spent the week sort of prepping and like trying to catch up on immigration law. I never looked at immigration law in my life until Mahmoud Khalil was arrested.
But I'm thinking he brought you on because of your free speech piece of it, since he's arguing free speech.
No, that's not why.
Right?
No, that's not why. No. Pisco actually had a connection, and because I've had some good faith debates with him, and Pisco saw me debating on another lefty channel about this topic a few days earlier. And then he had a space talking about my debate, and I jumped in that space with him. So the next day, he was being asked about Mahmoud Khalil, and they asked him, is anyone who liked the debate? He said he threw my name out first. And so I credit Pisco. A lot of people are like, why would you go on with Pisco? To be completely accurate, it's like Pisco's fans should be like, why did you go on with Good Lawgic? Because he chose me and made that connection for me. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to him for that. And I thanked him for that, repeatedly, because I wouldn't. I've been trying to knock that door for a while, and fortunately, I'll tell you this much. I mean, Tim, we got along really well. Tim was very, very pleased. As soon as the show was over, he said he'll happy to have both of us come back. He thought the whole discussion, debate went well, and thank God. A lot of his audience, he said there was a lot of buzz there. He goes, that might have been the best episode of Culture we ever had. And he told me that he'd be happy to have us both back on Timcast IRL. So all in all, I look at that. I look at the entire exercise as completely a win. My objective is I'm going in to talk about an area of law that I knew nothing about 3 weeks ago. If I'm able to hold my own here and not make any grave misstatements of law or embarrass myself or have a bad viral moment, and it maybe hopefully have one good or two viral moments, I'm like, that's it. But yeah, that was the goal.
Well, I think for this discussion, because now, and that's what I explained to even Kurt earlier. I was like, this was obviously not an area of law that you are familiar with, and it's interesting. I was reading through the documents, and the legal team that's actually helping this guy Khalil is actually my former colleagues when I was working at the law school. Yeah, they're the CUNY team from the CUNY Law School. So, and I know those people because I worked on some of those cases. Well, not in the immigration space, but in the housing space. So it's pretty interesting that they are happening. But what I think
I spent time reviewing. My research involved really looking up the cases that the government cited in one of their briefs, and just going through those cases. So I would know my side of it cold. And just sort of understand exactly when there was one point where he started talking about some Chinese law, which he claimed has been cited routinely and is still technically a law in the books. And everyone I've spoken to afterwards said that law was repealed in 1943. I don't know what the hell he was battling.
Yeah, the Alien Exclusions Act.
That was complete crap.
Yeah,
and that he was completely gaslighting and saying that's still a valid law.
I don't think he was saying the law itself was valid. I think he was saying the Supreme Court decision relating to the law had never been overturned.
Okay.
Yeah,
You don't need to overturn it if the underlying law has been eradicated. So what's the point to that?
That's true.
So,
I'm thinking. Well, let me do this. Let me just give you, because what I did was I took the background for the case, because I noticed, like, on the culture war,
yeah.
it was like you guys were talking about the case, but then it was like sometimes like not all the facts were like the same as like this. So I kind of like wrote it all down from the media. So I'll just go through it. It's Mahmoud Khalil, 29-year-old Columbia grad student. He's Palestinian Algerian, which I didn't even know that was possible. He was born to refugee marriage.
He was born in Algeria, moved to Syria at some point. He has Algerian citizenship, born in Algeria. I did a little research on this, and then went to Syria. In 2022, he got his student visa. He came here.
Go to Colombia.
In 2024, he got that upgraded to a green card.
Yes, and he was the lead negotiator for Colombia's pro-Palestinian student protest in 2024. Then he received the day before his arrest. I'm trying to because they gave me a lot of facts, but I just want to stay with the facts that are relevant, that are legally relevant for our purposes. He received the notice from ICE 1 day before his arrest about the deportation. This was based on the Trump administration's executive order targeting international students who joined anti-Israeli protests. On March 8th, 2025, ICE arrested Khalil in his Columbia apartment in New York. They refused to acknowledge his green card status and detained him anyway. He was transported, now get this, which I think is messed up, to the federal detention center in Louisiana, over 1,100 miles away. Yes. And this isolated him from his legal team for a while.
It did not actually. His legal team, to be fair, his legal team admitted that the facilities in Louisiana had excellent Zoom hookup, and they were able to talk to him over and over again. That's one of the things the government put in their papers, that his team admits that they claim that the reason they had to move was because of a bed bug problem they had in New Jersey. That there was an overcrowding problem, I think, in New York. They had to move to New Jersey. There was a bed bug problem there, and then they moved to Louisiana. Now, between you and me, I will admit that they almost certainly moved him to Louisiana, hoping that they'll get an administrative judge down south who's more likely to be sympathetic to the government, rather than one in the Northeast who's more likely to be favorable towards Mahmoud Khalil. So I will admit to you that I think that was I don't think that they lied, but I think once they were moving him, they're like, it's like the closest place is Louisiana. Really? I have a hard time buying that. I think they were like, we're going to get him in a jurisdiction that we feel is best suiting our needs.
They're playing games, but it's that's fine. I don't want to get caught up on that. Oh, March 10th, 2025, even though it's messed up. March 10th, 2025, the federal judge blocked his deportation pending a review. Legal arguments that have been briefed by both sides. First, the government's case. They say, because they're making the allegations, so I'm giving you the government's case first. And again, I'm trying to give it to you cold without any fluff. They said that this is a national security foreign policy grounds. Now they were citing some of the wrong law, but this is INA section 237. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio has deemed, because the Secretary has deemed Khalil to be a threat to U.S. foreign policy. That's a rarely used law, and it allows non-citizens to be removed if they harm U.S. interests. Yeah. The way that Marco Rubio and the government is saying that he harmed it is that he has an affiliation with Hamas. The administration claims that Khalil was involved in pro-Hamas activities during the Columbia protests. He was labeled as an anti-Semitic protester with extremist views, and they say that helps justify deportation. And he also says that his people say there is no public evidence provided that he is affiliated with Hamas. But to be fair, the government claims that they have classified intelligence that support his removal and support his affiliation with Hamas.
Right.
The executive order, they're also challenging the executive order, saying the executive order, freedom of protest and everything, the executive order itself could be facially invalid. And fourth is the immigration piece. The fourth thing is that the government then amended its complaint and now says that he had technical violations on his application. One, he forgot.
When he tried upgrading from a visa to a green card, that there were technical issues there.
And the technical issue that they cite in their papers is that he forgot to let them know that he was an intern for a pro-Palestinian.
He worked for the Syrian embassy in Beirut.
They said that he was he forgot. It's an internship that he forgot to put on his thing that he was working in Palestine, but it's an internship that he failed to. It's a minor violation, but it's a violation at most. And the government's saying that's fraud because he didn't put the fact that he did this internship. Right. Khalil's argument from the papers is that his arrest was retaliation for his political speech and campus activities. That U.S. law protects free speech of non-U.S. citizens. He also says that there was no warrant, no notice, which I disagree with. There was notice. He was denied access to his lawyer initially. He was transferred so far away so he couldn't see his legal team face to face, Louisiana versus somewhere in the Northeast. And the government tried to fast track his deportation.
Fast track how? What, through regular APA procedure?
They just put it's just that they fast tracked it. In other words, usually it takes a long time for people to be deported. They're trying to deport him in a week or whatever. So okay. That's what I think is faster. They also say he has no criminal record, no evidence of terrorist support. There's been no allegations of any type of crimes or evidence of thing. It's just it's all we have secret evidence. And deporting him would violate fundamental fairness because these are just blind allegations, and he has the right to defend himself against these allegations, especially if they're going to do it. There's also a note here that deportation is not considered a negative offense.
It's not considered a penalty.
But
it's not considered punishment.
But I also have here, so it not being able to get a liquor license, even though it's not a punishment, it still has a negative effect, and that's essentially what they're arguing. And the last is that they argue that the case is politically motivated. So that's I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add or anything else I think I missed. But and just also so we can the one thing that I think is the most important thing that I put last is that he is for all intensive purposes a lawful resident alien with the green card, and he was in the United States at the time, which is all legally relevant. Go ahead, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I think that's a very good recitation of the timeline. And one of the things that was not in the timeline that I heard was any allegation by the government in any of the proceedings that they're trying to deport him relative to any crimes he might have committed. So, like, there's been people who have been.
That's an allegation.
No, I'm just saying because people keep mentioning it. People keep mentioning it to me on my Twitter feed. It's like, first of all, if he's committed a crime, charge him, convict him, innocent until proven guilty. Still a thing. Last time I checked. And second of all, it's not even in the papers anyway, so it doesn't matter. So, yeah. But I will note that the changing rationale of the government on their different rationales of why they're trying to do it is not exactly encouraging. It's they're searching for something rather than having a real basis in fact in the first place.
Okay, all right. So I'm still not sure I understand the issue.
Oh no, that was just laying out the facts and the circumstances before we get
so if we talk about it's 237 AC24 or something like that. You have to like go through like a very convoluted. I know it's to find the actual statute that they're relying on, basically saying the Secretary of State has the power to remove whoever the hell he damn well pleases if he considers it to be in the national interest of national security. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's essential. That's what they really were hanging their hat on from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And now the question is, can you bring freedom of speech claims to attack that? Right? That's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, well, you want to say that you want to say that you're removing him because Secretary of State is deeming him a national security threat, but that's violation of freedom of speech. And it's like, I'm not even sure how it enters into the realm of the immigration law. Because let's just stop for a second and think for a second, okay? Let's assume that he was mute, okay? Let's assume he was deaf, dumb, and mute. Never said a word in his life, okay? Helen Keller. He's Arabian Helen Keller, okay? And for one reason or another, in the courses of negotiating national security, that Rubio is talking to some foreign leader. We call him Bibi Netanyahu. Could be Assad. Could be anyone else. Doesn't really matter who it is. But that individual basically says, "I can't believe you allow this scumball to stay in your country, and you're giving him you're giving him royal treatment by allowing him to be there. And I'm not negotiating with you any further in this particular matter as long as you're playing host to that jackass." Do you think that Rubio would have the authority to say, all right, national interest, we need to deal with this country, we're getting rid of this guy?
Well, there was that one U.S. Supreme Court case that I was trying to find the name of, where they discussed the authority of the Secretary of State to invoke this provision. In that particular case, it was a German green card holder, and I don't remember the name of the case. Okay. It was, but the Supreme Court's rationale relied on the fact that we had a declared state of war at the time with Germany. And so it's not necessarily clear that the provision that the Secretary of State is using can be used in
there's nothing in immigration law which says that during times of war, or that times of war even play a factor. I understand and I can respect the fact that if you found a case that implies that it may be a factor, that would be a battle that Khalil's team would have to establish. The point that I'm trying to make is they're trying to make it as because he's saying things the government doesn't like. That's what the American government doesn't like. That's why they're getting rid of him, when it really could be a matter of, no, it's a different government. I mean, I have to work with this government. And I might love what you're saying, but they're really offended by his presence here. And I have a right to get rid of him so I can help pave the way and make life better for 330 million Americans. So now it's not a matter of free speech. It's a matter of, this is what I need for my foreign policy. And this is why the Supreme Court has routinely said, it's not our jurisdiction to review this. The only thing we can possibly review for is, was the government being racist? But if they have a facially legitimate and bona fide basis for getting rid of him, they get rid of him. And that's what the statute says. And I feel frustrated with myself and disappointed myself that I didn't state this as succinctly on Friday. I'm telling you now, I'm saying it far more succinctly than I managed to express it on Friday. But tell me where there's a flaw in that logic, given the statutes and how the Supreme Court has treated the wide deference that's given to the government in this area.
Well, it's horribly flawed understanding the contextualizing this whole issue. And what I mean is horribly flawed is that you're pronouncing them in almost an absolutist type of way, but not recognizing that the facts, especially with the law is currently, seem to suggest there is an issue, a First Amendment issue here. So, for instance, in the case that I think you guys like to cite, Reno v. American Arab Anti-Discrimination Commission, right? And you guys have that. Now, in that case, just so. I'll lay out the case and why you guys think it's so good, so the audience, because the audience is probably like, what the case you're talking about. Now, for those people,
in that case I mentioned several times during the
yes, in that case, there was 8 Palestinian nationals. Some of them had green cards, some of them had visas, and they were associated with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, another one of these Palestinian groups that the government hates.
You think it was the People's Front?
It was the Popular Front.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Back at that time, the joke was a private joke because back in that time, there was like the People's Front, there was the Popular Front.
I thought it was the Life of Brian joke.
That is a Life of Brian joke. Yes, the Life of Brian made a joke because it was so prevalent back then. So back in 1987, the Immigration Nationalization Service initiated deportation against this group. And I was obviously the same thing as it's now some of those, the ones that overstayed their visas, they were like, well, you're only supposed to be 6 months. They were here for like 8 months. So you had some of those, and then you had some of the people who were green card holders who were also set for deportation. And the government's argument was that they were engaging in activities to support a terrorist group, which was the Palestinian organization at that time. So we have very, very similar facts here. And it says, but the difference is that in this particular case, the government dropped the terrorist charges, saying that they were with the terrorist organization. They actually dropped that out of their arguments before the Supreme Court, and their only argument was that these were technical violations of immigration law. That they didn't care about the speech. The speech had nothing to do
with the reason why they were being deported. They were being deported because it was their visa overstays were wrong. So it had nothing to do with speech at all. It was just a technical issue. And with that particular piece, the court then came down and said, well, in that case, for the people who are visa holders and the people who overstayed their visa, you cannot now use selective enforcement as a way to get out of deportation. Selective enforcement is the cop pulls somebody's like everybody's speeding on the highway. The cop pulls over one person. That one person then says selective enforcement. Why pull me over, but you didn't pull everybody else over? So that's essentially what this case is saying. The court is saying they got you, and if you're bad, then you can't then say selective enforcement because they can only catch who they can catch. Now, one thing I think people fail to realize in this case is that after this particular case, the people who did have green cards were not deported. After the government pulled the reasoning about the terrorism, the courts found that the two people who were LPRs, they had green cards. They found that it was that the government's arguments were insufficient for deportation, and that their arguments about minor visa issues when it came to LPRs, the people who are the green card holders, was not enough to remove them from the country, and they were able to keep their green cards. Even though they had to fight for 20 years. So, especially and even on the first. So even in that case, the Reno case, at the end of the day, the people with the green cards were able to stay in the country.
That case wasn't invoking 237, the same statute, was it?
No, that's the case that you guys brought up and said that was the best case for your cause. And what I'm
saying is that case applies to even a broader context of and gives us some understanding as to how the courts will deal with immigration in general. But when we're talking about this specific form of a basis for deportation, I mean, the Supreme Court has said that this is an area which we are they're loath to review ever. Whenever they're talking about an issue of national security and international relationships, that they're very loath to actually try and weigh in. It's not the domain of the judiciary. The Congress has specifically carved that out to be the domain of the executive branch. So the only thing that the only hurdle the executive branch needs to establish is that they basically were not being racists. Like, and as long as they can reach that minimum threshold, in that case, they're going to succeed, and the court has no basis to even review any further. This is why they're supposed to play out the Administrative Procedure Act, and that's the test, that's the yardstick that the administrative judge is supposed to be searching for. Is, were they acting out of looking for some racist motive against this particular individual, or is it a matter that they were potentially dealing with an issue of national security?
Well, even then, if that's right, though, but then the judge does have the ability to at least look past the Secretary of State's statement.
Not this judge, though. It's supposed to be the administrative court judge, not the district court judge. Not every person can get into district court. You gentlemen know that as well as anyone. It's not like anyone could just walk in and say, I want to get there. But he's used 1A. He's used 1A as a basis to try and circumvent and say, I have a right to go into district court, even though the act itself, which governs immigration, doesn't give him that authority. That's why I'm saying, from a procedural basis, his application seems wholly defective.
If you're arguing it's premature that because he hasn't exhausted his administrative remedies, I might concede that point.
Right. Well, that I think from the get-go. But even I feel, and I sort of want to circumvent. I don't like relying on that, because in that case we'll have the same argument.
Yeah, we'll have the same argument. Yeah, exactly. Because the administrative judge, presumably, let's suppose they agree with this. They say there is nothing there, and then he wants to go to federal court to have that review, and then we're back where we started.
But at that point, once the administrative court has said no, they're not being racist. So now, what do you have left, though? Because a district court is not allowed to review it any further. That's what the Supreme Court said. So if they're not allowed to review it any further, that's what I'm saying, is that this format, as far as what they've done here, what he's supposed to be going to district court is basically if he says that there was some sort of flaw, if he says there was a problem in the way the whole administrative process worked in my case, that's That's what I'm coming here to complain about. That's where he can get in there. But he doesn't even, to my knowledge, I mean, look, you went through the timeline there, Nate. You tell me, is there a complaint that they were disregarding their duties under the APA? Because I don't think that there is.
Well, I think, number one, it's the type of claim that he's bringing. He's bringing a habeas petition.
Right.
His habeas petition is saying that his body is being seized because of a constitutional violation, and that constitutional violation is based on speech. Now, the complaint that the government put forward essentially says it was because of his speech is the reason why the deportation is going on. His commitment or the things that he was saying, his protesting apparatus and things of that nature. So, since that is the underlying thing that's got the government that the government's using, the baseline allegation the government's using to get to deportation, he's saying, well, that shouldn't. He's going to district court and saying that should not be the basis of my deportation, my speech. So that's why the judge was able to give him a stay to see if that's a viable claim. If the judge says no, that's not a viable claim, then you go right to the deportation. But the judge says it is a viable claim. Now, and that's the difference between this case and the Reno case. See, the Reno case, they went in with technical violations of the INS law and the pretext, and then the government dropped the pretext. They dropped the whole terrorism thing and said, hey, we're just going to get you on the violations. Here, the actual, there is no, they're saying literally it's because of the association and the speech. That's the reason why we're going to deport you. So that gives him now the argument to say, well, they've seized me unlawfully based on this First Amendment violation. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think I get where you're coming from. My question for you is this. You know, did your research indicate that there's any statutory or case law authority to assume that a green card holder has stronger First Amendment rights than a visa holder? Okay,
so the case law. So all right, so the case law that I found, and I looked at some treatises. That's from Google Scholars, some things, some write-ups on this, and this is the way the case law says it is now. And they even in the cases that you cited, the Reno case, even Mahmoud's case, both the government and they all cite
the Hansiati's case. They all
cite Bridges versus Wixon, and even that cites another case, but
that cites Bridges versus California.
Yes, now. In each one of these cases, it stands for the proposition, and then Bridges v. California cites Yikwell. Now, and that's when he started talking about the Chinese cases with exclusion, but I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, so Yikwell, which is the case, is saying that was an equal protection case in the 14th Amendment incorporation, and that said that non-citizens, you can't discriminate against citizens and non-citizens. They have the constitutional rights just like citizens if they're in country. I want to make it very clear, in country. And legal. So if you're legally here in country, you have the same constitutional rights. And you could think about that for search and seizure, think about that for anything, right? They have the same constitutional rights. Then when you move forward to Bridges v. Nixon, Wixon, when you move forward to the Wixon case, the court straight out says, when you read the court essentially defines the word persons. Now, in the Constitution, you have people, you have citizens, and you have persons. This court, the Wixon case, defines person and essentially says, I'll quote it. In the United States, the United States Constitution, the word persons under the Constitution encompasses aliens. Encompasses aliens. Sorry, this says the court explicitly recognized that aliens, non-citizens of the United States, are persons under the Constitution, and they highlight persons for freedom of speech and press, according to aliens residing in this country. This was written in 1945. So in that sense, the court here is saying that when you're in country, legally, you have both rights. And then Scalia, the later case of Reno, Scalia limited it. Scalia was like, hold on, not all aliens, because in the Wixon case, Wixon just said aliens. And there was like this open question of would that mean illegal aliens, any aliens? And then Scalia moved forward and said he's limiting it to lawful permanent residents, LPRs, and you'll see that all within the Reno opinion. He
specifically gives an added status to a green card holder as an LPR compared to someone who's here on a
visa. Yes. So if you're essentially an LPR, lawfully resident of the United States, you have your rights are equal to a citizen's rights in this arena. If you're in country,
I respectfully disagree with your read on that, and I'll explain to you why. Because if you look at the language of the 14th Amendment, let's just back up here and look at the 14th Amendment. It says all persons. Now you're saying persons are just any people, citizens are not, right?
Well, I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that. I'll give you. You can pull up the Wixon case, and I'll pull
Wixon.
Up
you're saying the Supreme Court says this. Okay, so all persons means citizen or not, which makes sense in this context.
It means citizen or alien.
This. Right, yeah. Exactly. Citizen or alien, born in the naturalized United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So now these persons who are not citizens are becoming citizens by being born here.
That's how you become a citizen. Yeah. See, everybody's a person
in theory,
and this is how you change a person.
As long as they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. In that case, they now become persons.
Okay. So you're a person, and then
let's go further though. Let's go further. To Section 1 though. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge any privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States.
Okay.
That's exclusively citizens. Nor shall the state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
That gives you all your incorporation. That's your First Amendment. That's your Second Amendment, right? That's all your subject due process.
So what I'm saying to you is this. This over here, when it says they can't make any person, that they can't give this to a citizen, and then it gives a different level here to a person. It gives one level to a citizen that if you're a citizen, then you can't abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States.
Yeah.
Then it starts talking. Then it starts analyzing. Well, what do we do? What do we deal with persons? And to me, it's saying nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Yeah. The problem there is that the privileges or immunities clause was nuked by the slaughterhouse cases, so it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
So explain to me what happened in the slaughterhouse cases
slaughterhouse cases is the reason we came up with incorporation doctrine in the first place, because in the slaughterhouse cases, it was review that tried to decide whether or not basically the Constitution's Bill of Rights applied via that clause in the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court interpreted privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States very narrowly. They interpreted it to be basically only like the essential aspects of citizenship that came along with the original Constitution, not referring to the Bill of Rights. So privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States was interpreted to not refer to the Bill of Rights, which is then why in the corporation cases that followed, they dumped everything into liberty. Liberty became the way to incorporate the entire Bill of Rights. So every provision of the Bill of Rights has been incorporated through liberty, not privileges or immunities. Incidentally, I think this is the wrong read. I think that was a mistake, but that's the case law.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if you see Justice Thomas, by the way, when incorporation cases come up, which doesn't come up very often, but like you go read, for example, McDonald relating to gun rights. Justice Thomas, I believe, gave a concurrence in that specifically on this issue, because he's like, we shouldn't incorporate it through liberty. We should be going back to privileges or immunities.
Yeah, he said it's stupid. Yeah. He said it's stupid. He said even if you read if you read the legislative intent of the 14th Amendment, they literally have it there because they held up another key. It's if you read the legislative intent of the 14th Amendment, they literally say this is the reason why we're doing it.
Yeah,
and the slaughterhouse cases read it out.
The Supreme Court completely ignored it. It was a horrible read by the Supreme Court. And then rather than fix it for some reason, which continues to escape my attention, rather than fix it, they then went through every provision of the Bill of Rights one by one, and they dumped it into liberty. So liberty became the way to interpret everything. It's really weird. And that's how we came up with the idea of. That's how we came up with the idea of substantive due process, which doesn't make any sense. How can you have substantive process? It doesn't make any sense. That's where we're at.
To this day, I never understood what the term's supposed to mean either.
Well, no one can figure out what it means, and that's why it came to be, because of some confusion and some BS from the Supreme Court in the late 19th century. Cases. Yeah, I think it was like 1890 or something. But yeah, that's
when the slaughterhouse cases were.
Yeah.
So what you're basically saying to me is, yes, Joe, your read of that amendment is correct, but the Supreme Court the Supreme Court disagreed with you.
Yep.
So and they suck, but that happens to be with the status of case law.
Correct.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Joe, but and even you're reading that amendment. The Wixon case defines person, and says person means aliens, citizens, and non-citizens. So you're reading that amendment with the Wixon case gives you your answer. Yes, they are covered under these provisions, and they're covered
But
under substantive due process,
at
which
the
gives
same
them all
time-
that stuff.
At the same time, there are multiple Supreme Court cases which say that the First Amendment rights of even an LPR are not as robust as First Amendment rights enjoyed by actual citizens. So
I have not seen
which
that.
case?
I
Which
have not
case is
seen that
referring
case.
to?
I've been looking
Wasn't
for it.
wasn't the Watkins case that we were looking at earlier?
I
Which
think it was
basically
called
talks about-
Hanciades is one of them.
Yeah, because Bridges. v.
I found
Wixon-
like 3 or 4 cases which basically were all saying it's not the same standard. It's just not. So
I'm willing to be corrected on this.
Yeah,
point. That'd be
I am.
interesting.
It's just that all the Supreme Court precedent makes it very clear. There is
no,
no.
I'm
the
telling you right
standards are
now.
the same.
I'm telling you right now. I'm positive. I saw so much case.
Hey,
I've been reading like one case after another. So like that's why I'm feeling. I
teach
feel like
me,
I've been
counselor.
I've been cramming. I feel like
Yeah.
I've been cramming on this.
Okay.
Because
You guys talk amongst yourselves because it's going to take me a good 5 minutes to find the
There-
right.
fair
there's,
enough.
there's generally a difference between in country and out of country, and
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's
true.
where that's where people get confused, because if you're outside the country trying to get in, they can deny you to even get in. Even if you can't come in here, you can't come in here, even because you're black, because you're whatever. They can say we don't want you in here.
Or because of speech and the federal government has in fact done it. People
Yeah.
have tried to apply for a visa to come here to, like, for example, speak at some rally, and the federal government has said no. Even though the speech would be legal by a citizen, they're like, you can't come into the United States for that purpose. We don't like your message. And you're outside the United States, you're not a US citizen, and you're not here, so you're not protected by our First Amendment. So go away.
But if you're here in country, the game is that's why I keep saying I don't know if I understand if there's one that would do it. But Joe's found it.
Yeah, I do think I found it.
Okay.
It was in because it was. I told you my research source, my primary research source was actually reviewing the brief that the government submitted. It was the government submitted this brief. It was it's 41 pages. Let me get the actual. Let me see if I can.
It's a pretty good
keep
place
this
to
up
look
for
for
you.
the case law. That's
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah, I'll pull it. I found what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to try and pull it up on screen so we can all read it together.
Excellent.
Well, that's the way to do this. Let me see if I can dig this sucker up. First, I got to get to the actual thing. Put on Khalil file. That's Khalil file.
Let me see. Let's pull up Barnes' explanation tonight. Let's see if I can find it.
Someone in chat said if Trump did it bad, would I condemn him? Of course I would. Anyone who follows my channel knows I've been critical of Trump from time to time when I think he violates the law. Sure.
Yeah, I like they have the two, what do they call it? They have Trump derangement syndrome and then Trump something syndrome, where it's like no matter what he does, he can't be wrong, but then you have the other person, everything he does,
Yeah.
he can be wrong. And then any criticism of Trump is this: you must make it. Like if you don't criticize everything, so yeah, it's funny. I think both sides are critically deranged, but it is what it is.
They can be. Of course, one of the things that concerns me is I know that Trump won't be president forever, and in the event that some uber lefty Democrat becomes president with an equivalent Secretary of State, I'm not necessarily thrilled about them having unchecked power. So it's one of the reasons I have to be cautious, because whatever rule that we try to establish needs to swing both ways. And I'm not sure I want the uber lefty Secretary of State to have this kind of power either. So
I like this bigger.
Hold on, let me pull up while Joe's
All
looking
right,
for that.
here it is.
Oh, you got it? All right.
Yeah.
I was gonna pull up Viva Barnes so he's here. Barnes' explanation.
Yeah, I don't know how that's a false equivalency to the person in chat. It's like, no, I don't know how that's falsely equivalent. I'm just hypothesizing such a person to exist.
All right, this is their brief. This is the government writing here. Okay, so obviously they're looking in favor. They're looking to be against Khalil. They say it's fundamental. Khalil misapprehends how the First Amendment applies in this context. While freedom of speech and press is accorded aliens residing in this country, Bridges v. Wixon, the Supreme Court has indicated that aliens' First Amendment rights might be less robust than those of citizens in certain discrete areas. Blumen v. Federal Election Commission 800 F sup. Then they mentioned 3-judge panel citing I don't know what this case is, Harisiades versus Shaughnessy 342 U.S. 580.
Well, yeah, let's go. Then if they're citing that Supreme Court case, then let's pull up Harris.
Yeah. The other case was.
Let's pull up 342 U.S. at 591, 592. See what it says.
That trial court case is a joke, but the other one is really good. It's because you're gonna find some. You just so everybody understands when you're generally you're gonna find some trial court who's going to say something. So usually trial court cases are.
Let's see how long.
Appellate cases are good though.
Well, they said 591, 592, so it's going to be at the end of page 591.
Yeah. Oh, you can control F, and just what are we looking for?
Yeah, just look for 592 and then go paragraph up.
They said 590.
Yeah, hit control F. Control F.
Yeah, there you go. Section 2. Yeah, that's what you're looking for. Section 2, because
the First Amendment is invoked as a barrier against its enactment. The claim is that in joining an organization advocating overthrow of government by force and violence, the alien has merely exercised freedoms of speech, press, and assembly, which amendment guarantees to him. The assumption is that the First Amendment allows Congress to make no distinction between advocating change in the existing order by lawful elected processes and advocating change by force and violence. That freedom for the one includes freedom for the other. And that when teaching the violence is denied, so is freedom of speech. Our Constitution sought to leave no excuse for violent attack on the status quo by providing a legal alternative, attack by ballot.
Hold on. So their site is bullshit because this is the distinction between speech for essentially the Brandenburg standard, right? Speech for violence versus speech for changing political policy. That's
no, because Brandenburg would have to be immediate, and they're saying not just merely immediate, but even speech that's advocating for violence in general.
Yeah, the government.
If they're saying, hey, look, in the next year, we need to overthrow the government, that would be violative of this, and it would not be violative of Brandenburg. So I think that to say that they're citing the exact same thing as Brandenburg is a misread of what this decision seems to be saying. It's saying that if you're advocating for violence, ironically, I think you're actually
that is Brandenburg, right?
Brandenburg has to be proximal in time and location in order for it to be deemed incitement.
Yes,
they're basically
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But over here, what they're saying is no. Even if it's not incitement, even if it doesn't reach a threshold of incitement, that an alien can be someone who's deemed to be ripe, I guess, for deportation. I haven't gone through this case in depth, but that he still can be ripe for it even before he gets up to the Brandenburg standard that would apply to you and me as full-blown citizens.
Well, hold on. It seems like there's a distinction. Well, all right, maybe we have to read the rest because they're making this clear distinction. Advocate to overthrow the U.S. government, right?
Yeah. So the assumption is that the First Amendment allows Congress to make no distinction between advocating change in the existing order by lawful elected processes and advocating change by force and violence. That freedom for the one includes freedom for the other, and that when teaching of violence is denied, so is freedom of speech. Our Constitution sought to leave no excuse for violent attack on the status quo by providing a legal alternative, attack by ballot. To arm all men for orderly change. The Constitution put in their hands a right to influence the electorate by press, speech, and assembly. This means freedom to advocate or promote communism by means of the ballot box, but does not include the practice or incitement of violence. True, it's often difficult to determine whether ambiguous speech is advocacy of political methods or subtly changed into methodical but prudent incitement to violence. Communist governments avoid the inquiry by suppressing everything distasteful. Some would have us avoid the difficulty by going to the opposite extreme of permitting incitement of violent overthrow, at least unless it seems certain to succeed immediately. We apprehend that the Constitution enjoins upon us a duty, however difficult, to distinguish between the two. Different formulae have been applied in different situations, and the test applicable to the Communist Party.
Sounds like the Brandenburg standard to me, brother.
has been stated too recently to make further discussion this time probable. We think the First Amendment does not prevent the deportation of these
No,
aliens.
I think I agree with Joe's read. I think this is broader than Brandenburg.
Yeah.
I think he's right. Brandenburg speaks to immediacy, and this speaks to not necessarily being immediate.
What did it say? But didn't it just say that at least, unless sometimes certain to exceed immediate? Maybe I heard that wrong. If you go up the sentence right above that, right where you're highlighted. Go down a little bit, right there. It says, I gotta pull up. Some would have us avoid the difficulty of going to the opposite extreme of permitting incitements to violent overthrow, at least unless it seems to be to certain.
Yeah, so it seems to me that's saying that some of us would basically prefer the Brandenburg standard, but on balance, we're going to apply something slightly different,
slightly less than the Brandenburg standard.
Yeah. So,
okay. Yeah.
So that does seem to contemplate something broader than Brandenburg when it comes to aliens.
Right.
So that would suggest that there might
be
that suggests there might be some nuanced difference
there may be
for the First Amendment for an alien. So I think Joe wins at least the point there.
Oh no, I think he does. Yeah, I think he does.
And technically, it's not my point. It's the point that the government brought.
So they're saying because the
I was trying to give you credit.
No, I know.
This is saying that since the government is giving you can remove the immediacy standard for deportations, that in terms proves that they have limited First Amendment rights.
And that, by the way, that particular example happens to be very ripe here. It happens to be very ripe here because I'll tell you right now, it's sort of assuming that they have record of Khalil saying we need more October 7th. So you or I, or any other naturalized citizen or born citizen who would say has full right and privilege to say we need more October 7th if that's your thing. You have the right to say it without facing any repercussion from the government. But based on that Harrisades versus Shaughnessy situation, it seems as if an illegal alien, even a green card holder, not illegal alien. And I know at least once or twice during the course of that debate, I erroneously slipped out the word illegal alien when I meant to say green card holder. But a green card holder would not be empowered to do that with at least risking forfeiture of his green card. That doesn't mean you can throw him in jail. It doesn't mean that you can. He has the protection. He has sufficient protection as being a green card holder or visitor to this country that we're not going to let the government throw him in jail. But for them to say, hey, we don't want this guy here, that perhaps, and especially since that's not criminal punishment, it seems as if that is their right.
No, but criminal punishment's not necessary because it could be any loss of anything. Liquor license, for instance.
The only reason I'm throwing that out there is because I did see a Supreme Court case which just kept it always came back to that. They're like, plus it's not considered criminal punishment. So it's like, so they sort of use that to rationalize giving broader power to the government. So. And that's why I say that. I know you can come back to the liquor license much as like what Pisco did, but what I'm saying is that language is not a language I came up with on my own. That's language that I lifted from Supreme Court.
Pisco has a correction for us in chat, so I think it's worthy of noting. He notes that this case we just read was pre-Brandenburg, and at least according to Pisco, he's saying that he's also saying that they were applying this standard from a case called Dennis.
Oh,
and he's also saying that Brandenburg overruled Dennis. So Pisco seems to be.
Pisco, if you're here, I have a lot of people who've been telling me ever since our debate that you basically were gaslighting me about that Chinese thing still being good law. So I just want.
That case was after Brandenburg.
Yeah, but
Shaughnessy is before Brandenburg.
I kept saying it sounds like Brandenburg.
Timeline correct.
All right, so this case is actually this case wouldn't even be. So this case is pre-Brandenburg. So this case actually wouldn't even do it.
Maybe, yeah. So you could make an argument that because Brandenburg overruled the case we just read on relied on, that the case we just read has been implicitly overruled. Although the Supreme Court doesn't really like implicit overruling. They want because there's other cases that have said that even if the foundations of a case get cut away, unless the Supreme Court actually overrules the precedent, the finding still remains. So I don't think you quite get to where Pisco wants. But it's a point
you guys saw the public saw 2 hours of me with Pisco. And some of you who are fans of this show have seen me bring Pisco on here and talk with him. And I've gone into spaces, and every time we're debating. And I just want you to know this: when the lights are off and everything, it's just, me and him and maybe a driver, and it's just the two of us talking, and it's just the two of us there, we are still going at each other's throats.
I believe it.
Scream. And like, no, you're an idiot. That makes no sense at all. You're coming at this like so ass backwards. And I'm saying it's literally like there was like no topic we could discuss without the other one of us thinking like you're deranged and out of your mind for having that take of law. So literally all you need to do is put a camera. And our driver was a guy named Chris. And he was laughing. He drove us an hour from the studio to a train station. And the entire time, if we were talking, we were arguing, not angry. It's like not like you scumble. It's kind of it's a lot like the way that I'll argue with Nate, but I don't have the nature of a relationship with Pisco that I have with you, Nate, where I actually like you. It's a matter. And by the way, Pisco, I want to express publicly my gratitude to you. And I told the show here earlier that he was the one who got me on to Tim Pool, and I am genuinely grateful, and I say thank you to you, Pisco, for that. So, but it was funny that when I met him and we spent any time at all talking to each other, the lights are off, the cameras are off, no one's there. Seriously, if anyone was
just
filming,
need to get a room, is what I'm
same.
hearing.
I'm just like, you're crazy. Like, you're literally, your take on law is so backward. It's unbelievable.
But I'm actually not understanding. Like, all right, so. Like, even what the point is, like the point of it now is that they've made this argument that illegal aliens have less rights than citizens. They bring out this case that talks about incitement and what's necessary for incitement. That's pre-Brandenburg. So that has actually changed a couple of years later with Brandenburg. So that doesn't seem like it's.
I don't know if that's changed or codified via Brandenburg. Like, to
establish
what. No. So my question is this: I don't know pre-Brandenburg what the understood status is. You sort of would need to know historically what was the status for what's deemed incitement pre-Brandenburg, and then read this segment in context.
Brandenburg makes
the understanding of the day.
Well, Brandenburg makes it very clear, right? You need that incitement.
Right. Now we have the Brandenburg standard.
It's like before that, it wasn't clear. Like that court literally said it's not clear. That's, as a matter of fact, they called it the extreme. The extreme, right? In that court, we just heard it's the extreme, blah, 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 blah. Some would use the extreme. And then Brandenburg, that is the rule now. So I don't think. I just think if we just logically play it out, then obviously Brandenburg affects this prior ruling for sure. It would have to, because they're literally saying that's extreme, and Brandenburg is like, no, that's the rule.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what people understood incitement to be prior to Brandenburg. Would you not agree that that's relevant here? Like, I don't know if Brandenburg's not about
incitement. It's about the immediacy of the incitement, right?
Right, but I'm saying it was defining what is incitement, and my question is, okay, so prior to Brandenburg, what was the understanding as to what was inciting?
Okay, so the case you just read used the word incitement multiple times, but then it literally, because I said, isn't this the Brandenburg standard? Remember we had that conversation, and then we looked at that sentence, and I was like, this seems like Brandenburg.
And Kurt and I basically said this seems broader.
Brandenburg. It seems
broader, and that would make it different from
from
citizens.
And,
the question is,
if that was after Brandenburg,
but the question is, how did people people think of incitement in 1940? What was incitement? Did it have to be proximal in time and location, or not? Was that something that people understood to be the
I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure it matters, because, as I mentioned before, the Supreme Court in another case, which I can't remember the name of, but said that even if the underlying foundations of a case get obliterated, the holding still remains unless the Supreme Court itself overrules the opinion. So even though the foundations of the case we just read have been undermined, because the case it relied on has been obliterated, the holding of the case we just read remains in place until the Supreme Court overrules it. So you could still make the argument that despite Brandenburg, this is still good law with respect to the illegal alien.
Oh no, I'm not saying that.
Or apologize, or just alien in general.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you wouldn't be able to use this case, but I think if this case came after Brandenburg, you both would agree that this would be on point, right? This would clearly show it's after Brandenburg, which has and this shows you the difference between Brandenburg. But since it came before Brandenburg, that now puts that underlying piece in. But like as you said, as soon as you put it up, hey, I'm using this case, and I would say, well, hey, that case seems to be put into question, Brandenburg. But I'm even thinking, even without that, do they have something better? Because I think this is minimalist at best in helping the cause and saying.
Well, they cite Blumen v. Fed Election Commission 800 F sub second 281 at 287. So I'll pull that up and see what we got. Let me see what we got there.
Because I'm looking for something that limits Wixon, because Wixon essentially doesn't give.
Kurt's point is completely wrong. Pisco says so. I have to find you don't believe me that there's a U.S. Supreme Court that says even if the underlying foundations are undermined, the holding still remains. You don't believe that case exists. Do I have to find a citation now? Because I will. If you think I'm wrong.
And do we even know what the holding of that last case was? Because we were reading a couple of dicta pieces, but I'm not sure if there was even a holding.
Well, I think that's what we just read was kind of the holding. It seemed like holding.
I'll pull up this case. The other case that the government cites in their support. So they say it's at 287. Political contributions. This case is OPAWL building AAPI versus Yost.
This is appeal court or?
This is Circuit Court DC, 2011.
Okay.
So what they say is political contributions and expenditures are active political expression, association protected by the First Amendment. According to plaintiffs, regulation of these activities therefore must meet First Amendment strict scrutiny standards. The FEC counters that 441EA manifests a congressional judgment on a matter of foreign affairs and national security, and thus subject to deferential rational basis review. We think the question is somewhat more complex than either side suggests, not only because the statute implicates both the First Amendment and national security, but also because it includes both a limit on contributions and limit on expenditures, which have traditionally been subject to different levels of First Amendment scrutiny. But the debate over the level of scrutiny is ultimately not decisive here, because we conclude that 441EA passes muster even under strict scrutiny. Therefore, we must assume the stake of argument that the ban on political contributions expenditures by foreign nationals is subject to strict scrutiny. All right, this is where I really want to get to. Over the last 4 decades, the First Amendment issues raised by campaign finance laws have been the subject of great debates involving all 3 branches of the national government. This case does not implicate those debates. Rather, this case raises a preliminary and foundational question about the definition of the American political community, and in particular, the role of foreign citizens in the U.S. electoral process. We know for more than a century that, so now, at least now we're starting to get into the whole foreign citizen thing. We know for more than a century the Supreme Court case law that foreign citizens in the United States enjoy many of the same constitutional rights that the U.S. citizens do. For example, aliens are generally entitled to the same rights U.S. citizens in the criminal process, among several other areas.
If you get into the good stuff.
Yeah. Aliens protected by the Constitution when they have come within the territory of the United States without substantial connections with this country. Illegal aliens protected by Equal Protection Clause in the context of public education. 5th and 14th Amendments protect all aliens within the jurisdiction of the United States, even those whose presence in this country is unlawful, involuntary, and transitory, from deprivation of life, liberty, and property within due process of law. Aliens protected by the Equal Protection Clause. And they're going through all these different protections that we know that aliens do have. Right.
We're talking about the limiting factor.
And then bringing in Bridges v. Wixon, resident aliens protected by the First Amendment in the context of deportation.
So that's on point for our case.
But that's that right. But this is they said let's look at page 287. This is where I think we're getting to the part that the government.
So I like how they hit that. They hit the bad stuff.
But we also know from Supreme Court case law, foreign citizens may be denied certain rights and privileges that U.S. citizens possess.
Okay.
For example,
like voting.
The court has ruled that the government may bar foreign citizens from voting, serving as jurors, working as police or probation officers, or working as public school teachers.
Yes.
Upholding a law barring foreign citizens from teaching public schools unless they intend to apply for citizenship. Upholding a law barring foreign citizens from serving as police officers. The court has further indicated that aliens' First Amendment rights might be less robust than those of citizens in certain discrete areas. See Harris-Ciades. So the point here is this. It's not just how I read Harris-Ciades or how the government reads it. This is a D.C. Circuit Court, which is reading Harris-Ciades, which Shaughnessy, that case that we brought up, and saying, hey, their rights under that, the Supreme Court has taught us that their First Amendment rights are not as robust as American citizens. It's not the same thing. So
fair enough.
Yeah, I'm fair enough. I hear it. Let me see. Beyond that, the Constitution itself.
I find it funny that specifically because of membership at the Communist Party, I find that funny because that was a basis for a lot of this, the
Well, hold on.
government doing things.
But even in this case, though, which I think is a very good case, I think because you have two citations. So essentially, what I think here is, I think the bottom line here is that, number one, the First Amendment claim is actually a viable claim, but whether the protections that this person has is enough to say yes, that you can't be deported based on this speech, or is it not enough? So, because that's essentially what it is. To say that he doesn't have a First Amendment argument, I don't think that's accurate. I think he does. I think he has a viable First Amendment argument.
That's why I come back. That's why I come back to the original point, which is under Section 271, if he is deemed an impediment to foreign affairs, it doesn't matter if he never said a word in his life. And that the Secretary of State, as long as the Secretary of State is not displaying a personal bias and has a facially legitimate and bona fide reason for wanting to deport this person, he is so empowered, and the court is not even free to review it. So just because he it's almost like this. It's almost like this. You know, we're throwing out this person here, okay? Because we're over capacity. How many people could fit in this dance hall? So we're going to take this guy who's standing near the door and throw him out. So now, but they say, wait a second. He never shot anyone, or you can't prove he shot anyone. And even if the gun just went off, it's like, I don't care. Maybe he shot someone, maybe he didn't. The point is that we have a good faith, as long as there's a good faith basis, and we're not particularly picking on this guy, to start going down the whole First Amendment. So the First Amendment, his use of First Amendment, they're trying to say is this is a kosher use of First Amendment. Doesn't matter. It's not about First Amendment. And that's really, I'm a little disappointed myself that I should have expressed this more clearly on Tim Pool. Although I think if I would have gotten a sentence and a half in, that Pisco would have started cutting me off and started talking about tren de Aragua, or however he was trying to teach me to pronounce it.
I think the problem with the analogy is that, so for each case that you brought up, like the other cases before, it wasn't really about the speech. It was like, they had some other violations, but in the cases that involve speech, and in this case, the removal is based on speech. So the process that's going forward now.
Who said so? Why is it based on speech? It's based on the fact that the Secretary of State says that the Secretary of State, they're alleging, they're trying to say that he's biased because of it.
Well, no. What they've alleged is that the Secretary of State is saying this person's speech, this person's affiliation, him supporting this group and doing this is Hamas. Essentially Hamas is against the foreign policy of the United States, and we're going to deport him based on that. Right? Okay. So if that's the case, if his speech is the issue and the reason why we're doing this thing, then his response to that procedurally was, okay, you've now arrested me, so now you've seized me, so I'm going to put in my habeas petition based on free speech. And the government is saying it's because I said this, that's the reason why I'm in this position. Now, the government can do one or two things. It can say, well, hey, listen, you don't have these free speech rights in this particular, in this way. So guess what? Your habeas is denied. And now you go to a deportation judge. And you've said this a couple of times. You said it's non-reviewable. I think you're right, but I don't know how Chevron has changed that, because I think before you would be right, would be essentially non-reviewable. I think Chevron may have given a district courts a little bit more power when it comes to the
Chevron
APA.
is dealing with regulatory agencies. I don't think it's dealing with decisions by the Secretary of State or issues in national security.
Chevron's dead.
Chevron was only dealing with the ability of regulatory agencies to interpret ambiguous regulations. That's what Chevron was dealing with. That's not dealing with the Secretary of State making a decision about national security.
If the Secretary of State is employing a statute, and he's saying, based on this statute, I'm interpreting this person to blah, 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 that can be challenged.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to compare the Secretary of State to the EPA, the IRS, or any other government agency. Because
don't forget the Secretary of State makes its own rules, and if they're interpreting their statute, because that's what it is, right? This is a statute for the Secretary of State. He's interpreting it a certain way. That interpretation under Chevron couldn't have been challenged, but that interpretation now, because Chevron is dead, can be challenged.
Yeah. Okay. And respectfully, I don't think. What was the case? You would know, Kurt. What was the case that overturned Chevron?
Oh, geez, I don't remember the name of the.
Come on, this was 10 minutes ago. It was 10 minutes ago.
I don't know. I was just so happy it died that I didn't care.
But in this case, you would agree, though, the underlying conduct that they're saying is speech, right?
No, but I don't think that speech equates to a First Amendment issue, and that's part of the issue here. This is what I want to get at. When he's saying it's a national security issue, with that
national security, it's something. It's something else.
No, when he's invoking this statute, he's saying it's a national security issue.
Yeah, Luperbright. That sounds right. Yeah,
that's what he's saying. He's saying it's a national security issue.
He says, a threat to foreign policy. And
it's affecting foreign policy, and it's a national security issue. So here,
they don't use national security. It's usually it's 237A4C, threat to foreign policy.
Threat to foreign policy.
Yeah, threat to foreign. Right. That's why it's said.
Threat to foreign policy is a better phrase. Okay. And I appreciate you correcting me on that.
No,
threat to foreign policy, meaning it's not simply a matter of like what I like, but it's a matter of dealing with our foreign policy, meaning with other nations, right? I mean, that's inherent in saying threat to foreign policy.
Yeah,
foreign policy is going to be like, okay, we have to deal with these other diplomats and world leaders, and we have to deal with what where they're at.
Yeah.
Now, his speech, it's not a matter of I want to punish him or I want to chill his speech or whatever. His speech is impacting how these other diplomats and people that we're dealing with are dealing with us. So now he is impacting. It's not a matter. It's one thing for the government to say, we don't like it because we find it noxious and we disagree with his opinion. It's another thing to say, we don't like it because of the impact it's having when we're trying to conduct our foreign affairs. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So it's no longer a First Amendment issue. It's a matter of this is the impact of your speech in that it's screwing up our foreign policy. So now it's not a matter of, so when he's saying because he's supporting Hamas, now that ends up triggering this whole thing. What he's basically saying is that now, for example, perhaps UAE sees this guy stirring up the crowds and it affects how we deal with the UAE. That the UAE now is dealing with this differently because they see him stirring it up. So it's not a matter that I care about whether or not he's stirring up. It's that it's affecting foreign policy that I can't get the UAE to deal with me because they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe that political pressure is going to change it and we can play hardball with you. Or maybe Saudi Arabia is acting differently. Or maybe Bibi's acting differently. Maybe they're all acting differently because of the fact that this guy is stirring it up. And that's affecting foreign policy. So it's not a matter, and through his support of Hamas, he is affecting foreign policy in our negotiations.
It's hard to believe this one guy could be affecting. First of all, it's hard to believe this one guy.
It could be that there's 50 of them.
And second of all,
it could be that there's 50 of them.
As you pointed out earlier, if this was an American citizen, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
You're right.
American citizens could be.
You're right because
all day long.
You're right.
And, other nations are angry at us, and we were like, well, piss off.
You're right, and God bless American privilege.
Right.
But that's my point. That's God bless American privilege.
So how much can it possibly affect foreign policy if we're
that's
talking
not
about
for judicial review?
Well, we're talking about the speech. We're talking about the speech.
But
this guy's speech is the same as all these Columbia students. How much can it matter?
Minister Addis Ababa, it doesn't matter because you can't be reviewing that. That's not your domain. That's the exclusive domain of the executive agency.
Joe, you keep saying it cannot be reviewed. Number one, and this is where I think the disagreement comes in. Number one, we agree this is a speech issue, and I'm just going to say it. I don't sound so crazy here, but the Constitution overrides statutes, and in this particular instance, if we're talking about speech, it does invoke the First Amendment because it's directly talking about speech. Now, what you've said, and I'll give it to you. Yes, he can do all this. But then at a point, there has to be some speech that may affect foreign policy that he could do that is covered under the First Amendment that they would not be able to use. Now, the issue is this speech, does that get to that particular line? If it doesn't, then his habeas claim is dismissed and he goes through deportation. If it is not, then the deportation is no good. And that has happened before. In the cases that you cite, the Reno case, the 2 green card holders, they are still here in the United States today, even though they tried the same type of scheme.
The Reno, those green card holders were not dealing with the Secretary of State saying that this person was impacting our foreign policy. They weren't dealing with that. That's why in this context, that's not a defense for Khalil.
I'll tell you exactly what they were dealing with. They were dealing with, instead of the Secretary of State, they were dealing with the Attorney General, and the Attorney General said that they were that this was in this particular case, it was national security. So in the Reno case, it was national security. In this case, it was foreign policy. In the other case, it's foreign policy. So you're right, they are different. In the national security case, those people are still here.
Well, this was
I'm just saying they are. They're still here. They are. They're still here.
I understand what you just said. I don't think anything you said impacts a word that I said, because I don't. What I'm saying is it doesn't. The point is not that they're punishing him. That they're saying we don't like your free speech. It's that he's having an impact on foreign affairs.
I'm granting you that. I'm saying,
and once he's having an impact on foreign affairs, it's not.
No matter
free speech. It's not a free speech. He could have been giving a recipe for famous Amos cookies, but if that's impacting foreign affairs, in that case,
he could be kicked. Let's say he was given a sermon, a religious sermon.
Let's.
No, I'm saying a religious sermon.
No. Now you're trying to get another.
No. Hold on. I'm asking about a First Amendment. He's given a sermon, and let's say the Saudis don't like this particular sermon this guy's given. Right, it's affecting the foreign policy. Right. Can they then remove this guy because it's affecting the foreign policy for the sermon? Now you're asking the sermon.
Let's make your case a little bit more realistic, okay? Let's imagine
what actually happened. What I just said actually happened.
Right. No, I like this. I like your question here. As you were asking it, I sort of could easily envision a scenario where someone comes here and is giving is getting up in some mosque, right? And he's basically he's speaking out against terrorism in theory. You can make it even better, right? And fundamentalist leaders from some other country who Trump's trying to negotiate with are very outraged, and they think that his expression of religion is an affront to Allah and to Islam, and that he is basically an apostate, and that they're very bothered that America allows him the freedom to come here and express that. And now you have Trump say,
"We're talking about a refugee now, a asylum seeker, basically." At this point?
No, I mean, maybe he would be.
I'm saying this guy's got to be a lawful permanent resident, just like this.
He's got a green card. Yeah. He's here, and now he's giving peaceful speeches in.
He's giving sermons.
He's giving peaceful sermons. Yeah. And it could be that he's giving sermons in Islam. It could be in Judaism. It could be in Christianity. And now his speech here is basically, which would be speech that perhaps the government would be in favor of. They like it. They agree with the messaging he's giving there. But it's having an impact that now when they're dealing with some hostile, aggressive foreign nation, that they are particularly outraged that this apostate, in their eyes, is coming and expressing peace. And they say, we don't want you housing him there, and we're not going to talk to you and have any negotiation talks with you while you're still protecting him and keeping him there and as the head of some religious organization. I'm telling you now, in my heart of hearts, I believe that in the interest of national security and foreign policy, that as amazing a human being as that individual may be, Secretary of State and the president are empowered to say, I'm sorry, you gots to go. And I think every one of you, if you think it through, will realize that's true. It makes sense. We have to empower our president to be able to actually engage with these people. The reason I like your example is because you can easily see your example coming to a place where the person is expressing a message that can be universally applauded by the West. And yet, because it is something that is making it difficult for our president to actually deal with foreign powers, that the president and secretary of state are empowered under the Constitution and so many statutes that give them exclusive license and domain in both immigration and in dealing with foreign policy to say, look, it pains me to do this, but we have to send you to a different country. Maybe we're not allowed to send you to a country that's going to rip you to shreds, but we have to send you to Canada. We have to send you to Australia. We have to send you someplace where you're not under our umbrella, so that we now have the capacity. I would say it would be wrong for the president to basically give this guy over to this terroristic type of ideology and then watch this guy get stoned to death. That I think would be evil, and that I don't think he should be empowered to do. But to say, hey, look, I got to banish you and send you out of here to another country that will, they're not trying to negotiate with these folks, I do think 100% it makes perfect sense to say that the president should be empowered to do that. And it's a difficult decision, you would imagine, for any president to do, but you can understand why that would be a logical empowerment that the executive agency would be entrusted with. Does that not make sense to you? Just morally and philosophically, that makes sense?
Not as a lawyer, no.
Okay, why?
But as just a layperson, yeah, that sounds good. But as a lawyer, no.
Why?
Because the Constitution is the Constitution. It's the Constitution first, statute second. You're essentially putting the statute over the Constitution. And and I'm saying, in the particular case of somebody giving a sermon here, and and he's here lawfully, and the government says your sermon or any First Amendment because you're lawfully exercising First Amendment, giving a sermon, we can now remove you based on that. I think is affront to the protection, because I think the First Amendment in that case protects that speech and does not allow the government to use that speech for his removal. Okay. I think that habeas petition would be found that yes.
I don't think his speech in that context is any different.
I think that triggers your First Amendment religion. I think that triggers also your First Amendment speech.
I respectfully think you have a confused perspective on the First Amendment, because I think that what you're doing here is you're conflating the fact that he's using speech or he's using the expression of idea rather than what he is doing. Meaning, instead, let's imagine that what he's doing is not giving speeches. Let's imagine that what he is doing is he is building an orange grove because he loves oranges. Okay? And that's what he was doing. It's not trying to make a statement. It's nothing of that kind. He just really loves oranges. Okay? Really, really loves them. No speech that he's saying, nothing at all. No speech that he says here in this country. And for one reason or another, his presence here is found to be offensive by a foreign nation who really doesn't like the fact that we're protecting him. He never says a word. All he does is tend to his orange grove. And I'll tell you right now that I think because now that's not a First Amendment issue, you'll be like, oh, yeah, he's empowered to do that. But as soon as he opens his mouth, now that creates some brand new protection for him. That makes no sense. It makes no sense that because he's opening his mouth, then he's using expression that now creates a protective umbrella that otherwise would not exist for him.
Joe, what you've done is you've created like an analogy that's nothing close to what I was trying to express, and you've built the straw man and you've chopped it down, but it's not anything close to what I was saying. So I just want to be
How do you
clear.
think I built the straw man?
All right. So in your recitation of the facts, we changed a lot of the underlying elements of the situation. So for instance, this person, like you said, he's building an orange grove. Well, that's not speech. That's not trying to convey a message. That's not a First Amendment violation. And I think let's get to where we agree first. I definitely agree.
There's a reason
this person. Well, hold on. Let me just say this. Our agreement is if this person said nothing and the government wanted to remove this privilege of taking away his green card and deporting him and say we're not going to then give a reason, then I think the government may have that authority, even though I think that's even a little tenuous because they've issued you a situation and they're removing it. So there's a process that may even be due there. But but for the sake of argument, I'm saying yes, they can deport him if he does nothing, if he's just sitting there laying down, and they say we're going to deport, we're not going to do it. But there are certain reasons why you cannot do that. And that's where it is. When you give a reason.
Yeah, I think this is exactly
that's
right.
Yes.
It's akin to I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but it's what reminds me of. It's like a work for hire. It's like you can fire anyone for any reason except certain reasons. Like I can
Yes.
fire you, because you're late. I can fire you because I don't need you, but I can't fire you because you're black, right? It's like it's that kind of thing. It's like you come into my business, I can deny you service for any reason except certain reasons that I can't deny you service.
Yeah.
So when the government provides, as they seem to have in this case, they seem to be providing what seems to be an illegitimate reason, and they're themselves saying it's illegitimate reason. They sort of, hoist themselves by their own petard because they're the ones, bringing the issue to light. If they hadn't said it was because of a speech, it would be a whole different situation.
Joe would be right. I think if they didn't say, I think Joe would be 100% right. If they said, hey, you're just doing this based on foreign policy and we're going to kick you out, and it had nothing about speech, then I think he's screwed. But since they're the ones who are putting forward speech, then that gives the defendant the opportunity to say, my speech is protected. Because they're saying they're saying we're deporting you because of speech. So my speech is protected and they can't give me this action that I consider to be negative. Just like and that negative action could be a license.
The fact that he's opening up his mouth is now what creates a protection for him.
The fact that he's expressing an idea, speech. Yes.
That now creates a protection. Whereas if he was in a coma,
well, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to open his mouth.
If he was in a coma the entire time he was here. The entire time he's here, the guy is in a coma, and Rubio's trying to deal with another nation, and they're like, we don't like the fact that you have this guy there.
Yeah, and then to kick the guy in the coma out.
We want you to kick this guy in the coma and just transport him to Australia. In that case, we're totally allowed to transport him. But because he's expressing opinions, that's some people love and some people hate.
It's not just that he's expressing opinions.
Joe,
the U.S. government seems to be indicating that's the reason why.
Joe, see,
that's what you're saying. You're saying it's because of the fact that he's expressing opinions that some people despise. That's why. Now
we're saying the government,
not because he's expressing the opinions, because the government says that's the reason.
Because the government itself is saying, he expressed his opinion. He's a Hamas supporter. That's the reason, right? The speech and the people he's hanging out with and things that he's saying, that's the reason. So that's what I'm saying. The government is saying that. So now you're trying to say, well, let's pretend the government's not saying that. Okay, we can pretend the government's not saying that, but they are saying it.
No, I'm not. I did not say pretend that the government did not say that. What I'm saying is when the government is saying that, it doesn't mean that they're saying we don't like his speech. They're saying we don't like the way his speech is impacting our foreign relations. Those are two different things.
Joe, the legal analysis, they don't have to say we don't like his speech.
In that sense,
as soon as they say it's speech that is the issue, then he gets to go to a court and say,
I think
my speech protected?
I think it's because
I
think that's different, because if it was because his presence here hurts us because he's wanted by some foreign nation and it's embarrassing, that'd be a completely different issue. Yeah, if the reason it harms our relations is because of the speech still becomes the thing. At least it's arguable the speech becomes the thing. I think it's a valid point to be raising.
Okay, I actually. The point that you made, Kurt, as far as saying you can fire someone for good cause or for no cause, but not for bad cause, and trying to apply it to this scenario here, that argument at least creates, I think, an opening for an argument here. I still think it falls short, and the reason I think it falls short is because when they say, it's not as if as soon as they say speech, that means we're attacking him because we don't like his speech, and I don't think it opens the doorway that you think it's opening. That's my point. I don't think philosophically, fundamentally, morally, or legally it should be opening up that doorway. But I can understand why some people would think, well, now that you said that, we have to have concerns that perhaps it's that you're trying to punish his speech, not the impact that his speech is having. You see what I'm saying? In other words, it's almost like if you think about to a court hearing, when you talk about when we're trying to get speech admitted, an exception to hearsay, right? Mm-hmm. So you can say, the reason I want to tell you that he sat up in bed and said, I can't believe it's raining, is not to convey the truth of the matter of what he's saying, but to show you that he had a capacity to speak English, and that this guy heard him say that, so obviously he has a capacity to speak English, or he has mental decline because it was actually sunny as hell. So the reason I'm bringing this in here is not to establish the truth of the statements that he's saying there, but I want to establish for other bases, and now I want to get that statement in here, and that's why that's how I'm trying to get you fine attorneys to understand that it's not the content of his speech as far as the impact it has, as far as them liking his speech or disliking his speech or hating his speech or loving his speech. It's a matter of this is the impact, and it's the same way you would understand that there are bases to get the speech in there, and it's not the actual truth of the words, or because the actual words that are trying to establish a fact, but that it's the other factors that we learn about this situation that result from the fact that this person is opening his mouth and saying these words. And that's what I think is happening here with Rubio. I think that they're not saying we don't like his opinions about October 7th. They're saying we don't like what his expression about October 7th is affecting our ability to engage in foreign policy. And that's two different things. Do you understand? Did I make myself any clearer at all, or are we still as far apart as we were 10 minutes ago?
Maybe that'll help if we explain, or if we explain like kind of what I just heard, and you tell me if I'm understanding it correctly.
Okay.
So essentially, what I'm understanding is that you're saying that it doesn't matter the contents of the speech, because it doesn't matter. They're not saying we don't like what he's saying. We're in favor or we're not in favor. They're saying the speech itself is the problem, and it's hurting relations with foreign entities, with a foreign country. And because of the speech, whatever it is, we're going to remove this person from the country. Because it affects our foreign relationships.
Yes.
So that's what I'm so that is
what I'm saying. And that his messaging was exactly the opposite. They might have said in theory, they could have been saying the exact same thing to him because it's affecting a different world leader.
So now,
so it's not a matter of like we're trying to punish you for making this speech. It's a matter of the fact that you're making these speeches is impacting our foreign relations. As it happens, the speeches he's making are in support of Hamas.
So the argument you're making is essentially you're saying this is not a content-based challenge to the speech. In other words, they're not saying what the speech is, right? And that's one way you can challenge First Amendment speech is by saying, it's content-driven. The content of what I'm saying is the reason why you're blaming, right?
Yes.
But then there's also a second way to challenge Second Amendment speeches, which the ability to speak, right? The ability to say to whatever you want to say, right? My ability to speak. That was your Trump challenge, right? His ability to say whatever. And then we're also there's also another layer to this, which I would also say is is in when you specifically are making the argument that the content of the speech is not the issue. It's a speech. It's a speech in itself, and you use the hearsay analogy, right? Hearsay, how in one context is hearsay, but if it's for different reasons, not hearsay. That was the analogy.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand it. Now, I don't know if Kurt understands it the same way. So, Kurt, is there anything that I said that you don't understand, or?
I think we're getting closer. I don't think you're going to agree with me, but I still think we're getting closer to understanding.
Well, I'm trying to. I want to understand what you're saying from the legal perspective, because if I'm just going to argue it and say you're wrong, it doesn't make sense if I don't understand what you're saying, right? I would be the fool there. So my response to that is that I think we're arguing in two different postures in terms of the legal analysis. My posture to the legal analysis is the procedure to get to the final question. Your posture is essentially evaluating the underlying facts of the situation. So right now, we were arguing whether this was a viable claim of the First Amendment to get him to hold his deportation, and then we haven't even gotten to the likelihood of winning, but just that piece of it. So our argument, or my argument particularly, has been in terms of process. He has a viable First Amendment claim. As soon as the government invoked that his speech was the reason they were taking this action, that allowed him to invoke a First Amendment claim, to have a third party, a district judge, go in and see if the speech is protected. If the speech is protected, then that's when all the other things stop, because the statute from immigration cannot supersede the Constitution. So that's why district court was able to put the stay in place, because they want to see if the speech is protected without going into the content of the speech. whether the speech is protected. And now, if the speech is protected, then you cannot have these. You cannot then invoke the INS statute. But if it's not protected, then you can invoke the INS statute, and this guy loses. So I think what you're saying is that what I'm saying is you're right. It doesn't matter what the speech was. But as soon as the government invoked his speech or that expression as the reason, that now gave him the option of going to a district court and asking that district court to evaluate to see if that speech is protected before they move on to the next thing.
Not prior to the Administrative Procedure Act being filed. Not prior under 1252G, not prior to an administrative judge coming to an assessment as to whether or not they were acting within their bounds. The reason that's relevant. I know you'll say, I know we brought up, you'll say, well, we'll just have the same argument 6 weeks from now, right? But the reality is 6 weeks from now, you'll have a determination from an administrative judge who's actually looked at this scenario and said, oh yeah, what the government's doing here, in theory, from the government's perspective, they'll have an administrative judge who's looked at this whole situation and said, oh yeah, what the government's doing here is spot on, the right thing. And now you have a district court judge who's looking at it in that context, which changes the entire context.
Fair enough. And if that's the right procedural posture, I have no objection to that. That's fine.
The reason why I would object with that procedural posture is, well, that procedure is because courts like efficiency. So essentially what you're saying is, let's go through the whole trial, see if he's going to be deported. He's going to be, then 6 weeks, he's going to get deported, and then go back and see if the First Amendment issue. And so I think the courts would say the First Amendment issue is the thing that gets you through the door. If you can't, if the First Amendment issue, if he wins on the First Amendment issue, this is protected, then I don't think you get to I don't think you can get to the other issue.
No, the federal law is fairly clear that you have to exhaust your administrative remedies before you can go to court, even if they relate to constitutional issues. You have to exhaust your administrative remedies. So if that's correct, then despite the potential futility of it, you have to exhaust your administrative remedies first, because he could always win at the administrative level, and then there's nothing to appeal that saves the court time.
I agree. I think he can exhaust administrative, but here they've literally given him habeas protection before you even get there, because the seizure, he's already been seized. So the seizures have occurred. He's saying my body's been seized unlawfully because of a First Amendment violation. That's why you haven't even that's why you haven't even gotten to the that's why they haven't even gotten to the deportation or to the administrative piece yet. The administrative piece can't happen if
read the part that I pulled up.
The court shall not have jurisdiction to hear a case or claim on behalf of a residing decision or action by the Attorney General commencing proceedings adjudicating. Okay, yeah.
Or any other habeas corpus provision. Is notwithstanding any other habeas corpus provision, no court shall have jurisdiction to hear any case or claim on behalf of any alien arising from the decision or action by the AG.
And it's positive to me.
Yeah, and that's very definitive.
That seems positive to me. And this is what 2241 is what I'd be trying to cite.
Yeah, this is a habeas claim, right? Or any other habeas, right?
Yeah, it says or any other habeas claim. You can't come under any habeas claim. You can't come except as provided in this section.
Or any other habeas?
No, and notwistanding
any other provision of law, including other
habeas corpus provision.
No court
shall have jurisdiction to hear any cause or claim.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. So
that's what I'm saying is it has to go through the administrative judge first. And at that point, the district court, if they are inclined to take the case and consider a habeas petition, at the very least, they'll be able to have the review of this administrative judge and the determination it's not just from a one-sided government, but an independent party being the administrative judge who actually has reviewed this entire thing. And that's how Congress has directed the court to handle this sort of thing. So that's why I'm saying you want to talk about procedurally hold on. What's happening procedurally.
But this doesn't make sense then, because if this is the case, then why?
Why?
Maybe it might not be under that section. Well, only reason why I'm asking, because now I got to pull up the case log, because then why would the district court and the appellate court uphold his habeas petition on a First Amendment claim if the court doesn't have jurisdiction? From what you guys
wouldn't be the first time.
From what you guys told me.
Oh, you saying why would a court be ignoring statutes?
No. I'm saying
Trump's course of action.
No. We can look it up. We have you just pulled it up. I'm saying just pull up the case, the other case, the case that you pulled up earlier. This guy's case. Yeah, let's see what the court, because you can just pull up what the judge said.
I'm going to go through the whole. This is the brief that the government filed.
Not the brief, the order granting his habeas
petition. I don't know if it's attached. I don't think it's
because I don't know what section, because I know you guys, there was a section quote and everything. I don't even know if this applies to the section or anything like that. So that's what I'm saying. I want to see what this judge says. Maybe he might speak to that particular issue, and then we'll know. Because I know sometimes you'll say it's exclusive jurisdiction for this, but then this case that we're talking about, it doesn't. It's not even in the ballpark.
Maybe you guys can dig that up. I got to get to some super chats here.
Go ahead. I'll look it up. I'll look up this case, and I'll look up the judge's ruling.
8 U.S.C. 1252G.
The Mahmoud
Khalil.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because it'll say it in order.
The case number is 225 CV 01963.
Have it court order. Got it. Let me pull it up. Good. You read the super chats and I'll pull it up.
All right. Joe, pull up Barnes' explanation of tonight's stream. It's not confusing at all.
I got that pulled up too. If you guys want to
look at Barnes' stream.
Yeah, the exact place too.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I think I would. How long is it?
Maybe 10-15 minutes. It's not that bad.
Maybe we'll pull that up. Visiting is a privilege, not a right. Visiting is like going to grandma's house. You aren't going to go dropping a grumpy on her couch and telling her to deal with it. No, you're going to behave. That's actually part of what I was explaining. That wasn't part of what came up during the course of my debate, which is that, like, when you're a visitor here, you can be held to the same standard that you had to meet when you first were getting in the door. And there's nothing, and how I read AADC is that's the implication of that case. That AADC Reno supports the notion, and that if you fail to uphold that, in that case, they can say we're yanking your green card, which is another way that it's weaker. That you're sort of coming in here the same way if you plead out with a DA and you make a deal with them and say, hey, I'm not going to have any alcohol over the next year and over the next 24 months. In that case. But if you go have a drink, you could be thrown in jail for it. So too, for breaching your parole, so too, you can be contracting that in order to gain admission here. I'm not going to be espousing support for terrorist activity.
Yeah, I found the order. I just want to see if I can find the memo real quick.
Need to nick student visas until we fix ourselves. Totally agree there. There must be case law we're missing here. When you marry a foreign national, they tell you your spouse can be deported if you're not making enough money and not being lovey-dovey enough on social media. You signed docs for a visa, they violated the terms. That's what I was just getting at. Thank you, Ellie. If it's subject to review, how much worse is Obama's joining of citizens abroad look? I know Nate is going to cite place, but surely UC citizens' rights should be as strong abroad as at home.
No, because it's just jurisdictional at that point in time.
External affairs are solely POTUS when ASCAR is internal. Is difference in Reno case versus the Reno case, I think it means. And the TV show West Wing, a North Korean piano player wanted the fact they didn't accept his defection. Well, there you go. That's proof right there.
Yeah.
It's too bad we're not the Ace Attorneys universe. They could have held this guy's trial over 3 days and it would have been stacked against him. Salty, see, America is not going to become another country. Well, hopefully. Could be worse. Could be Bohemian. One in legal case here, did they say it was his speech? Is it the executive order? Did they name him? So I think that Rubio has gone on record as making statements, which probably can be imputed. I would imagine that he's speaking in his official capacity. But this is just like that poor Cuban kid all over again. You remember that Cuban kid? What was his name?
Elian Gonzalez.
Ah, there you go. That's right.
Yo, there's been this case has just been 2 weeks old. There's already 78 docket entries. It's freaking insane.
Bella Stella coming through with 20 good Lawgic memberships. I wasn't able to get to the names. God bless you. This is the queen of recruitment right here. Those of you who have been brought into the following courtesy of Bella Stella. I hope that each and every one of you has already expressed your gratitude to the queen of recruitment, Bella Stella, and her phenomenal work in bringing people into the following, which is not at all a cult type of cult. It's just a group
I thought this cult was more about belladonna.
It's not at all a cult type of cult. It's just a group of like-minded individuals who try to attain greater personal growth through community, unity, learning, and thinking. So there's just nothing remotely cult-like about it. And for just $5 a month, you actually can attain greater personal growth. And this is a gift. It's a gift of life that Bella Stella has granted these fine people. So I would appreciate it if you would express your gratitude to her. U.S. citizen speech has special designation protections. That doesn't mean speech doesn't exist outside that bubble.
The court does talk about that statute that you guys mentioned, and concludes that
we don't like it.
Yeah, so I can pull up. Matter of fact, read the super chats. I'll pull it up, and we can all read it together.
He also kidnapped a person on campus. So, by the way, as far as having greater freedom of speech, I mean, shutting down a campus, to the degree I understand he's not charged on that, but to the degree that he was involved in shutting down a campus, that is heckler's veto. That is not engaging in freedom of speech. If anything, he's limiting free speech in this country. His presence here is helping to limit free speech because they're stopping kids who are paying thousands of dollars to how much do you think, if you collectively, a classroom full of Columbia students have paid either by loan, by grant to attend one class? It must be $100,000 between that whole group there, each class that they shut down and says, we're not going to let you listen now because we're mad about Israel. So it's like they're infringing on free speech rights of American citizens because they want to engage in the heckler's veto and shut down universities. There is less free speech in this country because of
I want to go on record saying that I have no problem prosecuting all these people for any illegal activities that they did. Battery, assault, breaking, entering, just whatever. That prosecute them all, throw them all in jail.
And I'll tell you this
fine.
much: I wouldn't want him prosecuted for his speech. His actions, I want him prosecuted for.
Dude,
not his
all
speech.
all those things are fine by me.
If a dead person is handcuffed, has their freedom of speech been infringed upon?
Just so you guys say, the reading of the statute was wrong because the court clearly says that a habeas petition is triggered when the person is in immediate custody. And its challenges to present custody under statute section 2241. Together, it composes a single rule that consistently applied in lower courts that a habeas petitioner to seek a challenge to his present physical custody status within the United States, he should name his warden and respondent. So they're saying yes, it does not deprive them under current U.S. law and Supreme Court precedent.
All right.
It has it right here, and it also has
because he's
it
being
also,
detained.
It also has it
Because he's being.
It's when you would. All right, so what you're talking about is deprives jurisdiction when the person is not detained. But it says here. Let me share this so you guys can see instead of just scraping.
I remember if it was the Holder versus. There was another case in 2010, which I think was the Holder case, which basically said that detention is a natural part of him being. Of him being. Let me move this.
You're saying you said what?
I think it was Holder versus something with an L, which was in 2010 or 2011, which basically said that detention pending an a deportation proceeding is natural. It's not considered a punishment.
Yeah, it's not a punishment. I don't think anybody's saying it's a punishment.
But he's saying it's a punishment. But this Judge Furman is saying it's a punishment which triggers his right to supersede 1252G.
What do you mean? Why is he saying it's a punishment?
Read to us why it is that he thinks that this.
No, he's not saying deportation is a punishment.
He's saying his detainment.
Yeah, detainment is a punishment, but not.
But the court has said it's not. The court has said the detainment portion of a of deportation is not considered punishment.
Well, they did this. This is not using the word punishment at all. This is talking about
Then
when
why?
the person
Then
in
why
physical
is it still
custody. But here it
district
is, because it's going to explain to you right now. So they talk about the provisions of habeas that you guys were talking about earlier, and it says together. So I'll
Together
start
they compose a single rule as
the provision, and they
proviso that
wrong.
district courts may issue the writ only within the respective jurisdictions. The court reason forms an important corollary to the immediate custodian rule in challenges to present physical custody under 2241. Together, they compose a simple rule that has been consistently applied in lower courts. Whenever a 2241 habeas petitioner seeks to challenge his present physical custody within the United States, he should name his warden as respondent and file the petition in the district of confinement. This is talking about where they filed, not
this simple rule. The court
serves the important purpose of preventing forum shopping by habeas petitioners.
Whenever a 2241 petitioner. It says a 2241 petitioner, and the thing he read said 2241 notwithstanding. So I'm still confused.
Yeah. It does. I'll tell you, I don't understand. That was the holder. Look at the holder. Was that? I think they.
What's that?
Do a search for the word holder.
Holder. Green card holder.
Next one. Oh, there's 33 of them.
It says Singh versus Holder.
Maybe it was. Maybe that was that what I saw.
This says
the immediate custodian rule applies to core immigration habeas cases in which petitioner challenges his or her detention pending removal. That wasn't that case. Lies only in the district of confinement.
Because I know that's because I remember he filed in, I think, New Jersey.
Can you share with me a link to this?
Oh, you know what? Let me give you the link here. I'm gonna copy and I'm putting it in the private chat.
Thank
you. It goes here. That's the opinion from the district court. This is the United States District Court. Yeah, at the heart of the case. So this is the memorandum of law. The order, because here's the order. Oh, this is the notice. Hold on. I just clicked the wrong tab. This is the order I also had up.
Mm-hmm.
And the order is pretty clear.
Mulgera says the state by nature of being a state will always want to grow, so by nature I'm fundamentally skeptical, which is the wise move. Uterus Thief says, I just want to say I love it that the three of you got together to do this panel review. Seriously, absolutely awesome. I was hoping something like this since Joe was on the Tim show with Pisco. So there you go.
All right, so I
came in late, but have you guys seen Barnes' take on Mahmoud Khalil and related cases? So my half-informed take is that he disagrees with Kurt and Nate, but agrees with Joe. Your takes, love this, guys. I guess I should pull
it up. I'll pull it up. I'll pull it up now.
Yo, what do you? Let me just get through these. Yo, what do you think of possible Trump third term? I've looked into it. And it sounds crazy. We recently heard it could be a possibility. As of now, I really have no idea. Just curious. I'm not familiar with how that would be a possibility. But let's see him stay healthy through the second term. Joe, the 22nd is not clear regarding non-consecutive terms. If you lose or don't choose to run, does the clock get reset? The 22nd is put in place to address FDR's 4 consecutive terms. I'll try to look at the 22nd. Uzelian says, Joe, just so you know, about 15 minutes before the start, I put my tracksuit on and sacrificed and goat your name. All hell our leader, Joe. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's appropriate. Uterus Steve says, Kurt Panel, don't forget it. And I understand how it sounds, but Pisco is genuinely deranged, man. I mean that seriously. Just like how Destiny is intelligent, but also limited by his derangement. Same thing. Hence, 1PK says, because membership is in Communist Party is against national interests and security, exact reasons why they're kicking him out. Also says being part of Communist Party is 1A free association, just like the first case. And that, how do you guys explain that they were able to bounce people out for being part of the Communist Party?
Oh, I mean, that's just part of communist panic, which was a whole thing for a while in the Supreme Court doctrine for a hot minute.
Okay.
Communist doctrine. But as long as we're reading super chats, I feel like now's a good time for me to bail out because
all right, brother.
It's my sleepy time.
Thank
but
you
I've had fun.
Yeah, I appreciate you popping in here.
All right.
I'm about to
take care, brother. Yeah, if you want to share that link with me and I'll watch it with my audience and you want to get on out of here, that's fine. Just give me a link and what time to start at, and I can run it here.
No, I actually want to hear what Barnes says. I was going to listen to it right now. So if you want to listen,
all right,
now,
we can listen. Let me just get. I only have a couple left here. Scary opinion. I respect the Constitution as much as anyone, but the problem everyone overlooks is that the left hates America and only uses the Constitution to limit the behavior of actual Americans. Also, so effectively, the Constitution, in modern times, has actually become a set of rules that the right plays by and the left completely shirks and ignores while saying, hey, you got to follow the rules. You cannot win a game against someone who's cheating, but that this is what everyone has to come to terms with. Keep your principles, but apply them to principled people, not demonic woke psychopaths. I think that covers that. All right, why don't you make it full screen and let's get it going.
Oh, make it full screen. Sorry.
Yeah. You want me to do it?
Resident aliens, or in this case, simply student visas. What free speech rights do they have? Do they not have?
He's wearing my tie
Why
that I was wearing Friday.
Doesn't necessarily trigger due process protections. Then deporting leftists in general. Then we got the SCOTUS. We got SCOTUS on the Second Amendment. We got SCOTUS or on.
Let me move it forward because I think I quit the first time when he first started talking about it. Here it is.
A different position on these issues, but where Glenn I think went too far. He tends to like Israel tends to be his tripwire. I respect a lot of the work Glenn Greenwald has done as a lawyer and as a journalist. Fantastic, exposing the national security state. He has advocated for conservatives in the free speech space. So this is a consistent position he has. I disagree with his interpretation on what is taking place vis-a-vis various immigrants being targeted for deportation based on their political activities connected to Hamas. I think there's part of what he's saying has a point. There's a point where this can go too far. And I share that concern he has. But don't overstep. Don't go out and say, President Trump just imposed a hate speech code on college campuses. And I take him seriously. And I go and research the document he's citing. And no such hate speech code exists anywhere in the document. It's like, okay, this is, I think as Grok put it, it was an exaggeration. That's putting it generously. Grok is nice about that. But that's where I think there is no hate speech code going on. And when it comes to Israel, I have found, to be honest, Greenwald's journalism to be unreliable because this happened to me about 6 years ago.
Well, Robert,
he made a statement about something that took place. I repeated it. Some people challenged me. I went to research it and realized he was just repeating Palestinian propaganda. Hamas is not a source you can ever cite as a reliable source, unfortunately. It's the nature of the reality.
The news of the week, because I'll play devil's advocate in 1 second. Let me just see if the news of the week, for those of you who don't know, this Turkish student at Tufts had her visa revoked and is set to be deported. A judge has obviously since halted the deportation. And Marco Rubio comes out in the press conference. I did a highlight on it last week, where he says basically, if you lie on your student visa and you say you're coming here to study and you actually come here to be an activist and disrupt the campus, you're gonna cancel your visa and you're gonna be here illegally. We're gonna deport you. Some people were saying she didn't do anything to actively disrupt. She wrote an op-ed, and as if I have yet to get the actual facts on this one. It was very hard to get the actual facts on Mahmoud Khalil as well. When we got the actual facts, I said, everything right up until that video, you had an argument for, but that video where he says we're going to continue disrupting until we get our demands met, that it's tough to argue that you should be able to do that when you're here on the privilege of a student visa. I don't know what the facts are above and beyond this op-ed that this Turkish student is alleged to have written.
That to me, which I haven't seen that video, I'd like to see that of Mahmoud Khalil saying that. That to me is him saying we're going to engage in the heckler's veto, which is already not a free speech issue. This is a matter of we're trying to just clamp down free speech because until we get what we want, we're going to basically hold you hostage to us. That is a form of a heckler's veto, which is not free speech. So would you agree with me on that?
The heckler's veto is not free speech?
No.
I don't know.
If him saying we're not going to let anything happen on this campus until we get what we want is saying now that we are going to hold you hostage until we get what you want. That's not free speech. That's now taking an action to basically say we're going to stop free speech in an assortment of in a myriad of innumerable areas, whether it's about politics, about economics, about law, about anything. No one's going to engage in free speech till we get what we want. That is not speech. That is action. That is someone taking action, which may not be criminal action, but it's an action that the person is undertaking.
I don't know. I think I would need more to find it.
I'd love to see that clip that Viva is referencing. I'm going to ask him.
That'd be good. Yeah, that'd be a good clip.
Yeah.
To steelman it for Glenn Greenwald, people are going to say, look, it's even worse than codifying hate speech and implementing it. There's no codification at all. So nobody even knows what crosses the line and what doesn't. And what it looks like we have here, whether or not you think it's justified, is a politically, not motivated, but a politically targeted campaign to pull the visas of people who are, they say pro-Hamas. The steel man is going to be pro-Palestinian. I think that line gets fudged a lot, and to the detriment of the actual innocent Palestinian people. But people are going to say, look, we don't even know what we can and cannot say. It's just willy-nilly. If you're anti-Israel, you get deported. And if you're pro-Israel, you can get away with murder. What do you say?
Yeah, I think from a legal, so it's two things. One, Trump hasn't imposed any kind of hate speech code.
No.
What Trump has said is if you're a Hamas supporter, then you're going to be subject to deportation. And this goes back to the terrorist organization label that Hamas has received. And the Congress passing laws saying that if you support any terrorist organization, you will be excluded from the country one way or the other. And if you're already here, you'll be kicked out and be deported. A key component, and so there is no hate speech code. The question then becomes, does support for a designated terror organization, when that support only comes in the form of speech, is that protected conduct of someone who's on a student visa? And here there's a long litany of cases that suggest not. That they got some great names. So you got Feng Yi Ting is one of the big ones, and Wang Wing is another one. So
I got so many jokes, but I'll get canceled. I have to. Viva, you're not a child anymore. Wang Wing. Okay, I'm sorry. It's obviously it's going to be foreign names if we're talking about visas and having visas pulled, but
because a lot of the law that got litigated in this context was the late 19th century. You can watch a great show that was developed by Bruce Lee, but it was developed posthumously, obviously after he passed away. I think it was on Cinemax or maybe Showtime. That was about San Francisco in the 1890s. Really cool. Has some good cool karate scenes. It has a good sympathetic portrait, I think, of the.
Now, these are the cases that this guy was hitting you with, the Chinese cases from back then. But also, I want to make it very clear, a lot of those cases were about people who were trying to enter the country, which the government can. Everything we're saying.
Are you familiar with? Let me ask you this: Have you checked out these cases he's referencing here?
Yeah, some of them I have where they said you can't.
Because I know the Kim R case, which is not relevant here per se, but that was dealing with Chinese nationals who were living here and at a time when Chinese people could not attain citizenship. And that's why they say that one came up when it came up in the context of birthright citizenship, that and people were trying to bring up the one Kim R case in the context of saying that you have to allow for birthright citizenship. So that's where I came educated to the fact that there was a period of time in this country where Chinese Americans were prohibited from being able to attain citizenship. So you can understand how they would be very akin to a green card holder, right? Because they're lawful permanent residents who are living here, and the rights that were afforded to them would be an interesting thing in that context.
Yeah, but also a lot of those cases dealt with people who are outside the United States trying to get in.
No, and I agree with you. I agree with you that I'm not sure if the law makes as much of it. The one Kim R case
What do you mean? Of course, it makes a huge difference if you're outside versus inside the country.
Well, if he's a lawful permanent resident who's outside the country.
So if you're someone trying to get in, like in the cases before, where
he doesn't have a green card or a visa yet.
Yeah. Well, even there are some people who with visas. Like there's a case now in Boston, the professor who has a visa, who's here lawfully. She tried to come back into the country. They looked on her phone. She was like at a Hamas funeral or some stuff like that, and then denied her entry because at the border, the government is at its maximum. That's it. We don't have to let you in, but that's a visa though. So, and a lot of those Chinese cases were based on that. Like we don't have to let you in, but if you're in, it's totally different. Now we have to give you rights. Because we're really just arguing about the level of rights they have to give, not if they have to give them, or not if they have rights.
All right, go ahead.
For the most part of the Chinese population in San Francisco at the time, But a lot of Chinese workers were brought in to work on the railroads. Under the laws of the time, under China law at the time, they could not become citizens of the United States. It was prohibited or precluded of them. And a bunch of laws were passed over dispute over Chinese labor being present in the United States.
Yes.
And so the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by Congress. That should tell me when people are saying, "Oh, you can't deport someone for this reason or that reason." We passed laws called the Chinese Exclusion Act. So and it was affirmed as a constitution. So I'm going to give you some quotes from some of these cases.
So is Dred Scott.
Because I see people. Here's the core of it: the Supreme Court has ruled.
Not every case you don't like is Dred Scott.
Being deported doesn't.
No, but I'm saying just because the court said something in the past, and now it's just like that's what they said back then. Because like that was even changed. It was overturned by Congress. But I don't think the Supreme Court would rule that's the constitutional now.
Well, what's he saying now? Let him finish his
constitutionally protected interest. That it's not considered a liberty interest to be deported. It's not because you have no liberty right to be here in the first place. You're here by permission until you become a citizen. As long as you're here by permission, then your rights are then deportation is not considered punishment.
Correct.
That's why people are like, hey, what about the due process clause? Couldn't this limit this? In fact, what happened was a bunch of Chinese who were subject to the Chinese Exclusion Act who came into the U.S., thus were in U.S. custody, but they were blocked or were detained, filed habeas petitions saying we're wrongfully detained. The courts ruled, no, not only you're not wrongfully detained, we have no right to determine your jurisdiction or your authority, that this is exclusively within the executive branch, that this is a political decision when it concerns immigration. And this is what the courts are ignoring right now, particularly that rogue Judge Boasberg. So like, here's some quotes. This court held in the case of Feng Yiting that the right to exclude or to expel aliens or any class of aliens, absolutely, or upon any conditions, in war or in peace, is an inherent and inalienable right of every sovereign and independent nation. And it is the power of Congress to expel, like the power to exclude, aliens of any class of aliens from the country, may be exercised entirely through executive officers. Detention or temporary confinement as part of the means necessary to give effect to it are completely valid. The order of deportation is not punishment for a crime. It's not a banishment because you have no legal right to be present here in the first place. It is a privilege, not a right, to be present on a student visa in the United States. So they simply do not have the same First Amendment rights and protections as everyone else, nor would that ever be the case, nor is it, this is the point the Supreme Court has made repeatedly, nor is it the case around the world. The same, like, for example, if you're going to be Glenn Greenwald, why not be a little bit more critical of Middle East immigration policy? Right? I mean, all these people that highlight and hype how somehow the U.S. should be the only country in the world that allows foreigners to come in under the guise of study and get to interfere with American politics right on inside our own borders when no other country in the world allows that is kind of nuts. And especially doing it on behalf of an Arab and Muslim world where these people come from that deported every Jew they had in their country.
That's true.
I mean, there's clear contradictions here in how they're selectively choosing to apply some of these legal principles. Here's the quote from the Supreme Court: "No limits can be put by the courts upon the power of Congress to protect by summary methods the country from the advent of aliens whose habits or race or ideas may render them undesirable as citizens, or to expel such if they have already found their way into our land and unlawfully remain therein." So
to expel such and unlawfully remain therein.
Constitutional privilege that Congress gets to determine who comes in and who goes out, and they give that power.
The key language there, which would apply to green card holders, are to expel such if they unlawfully remain therein. So that seems to be including green card holders.
His language, it seems to be, but a lot of these cases that he's quoting is before
you
Wixon.
Question, right?
These are all before Wixon and all these other places.
There's 60 years before Wixon.
Yeah, and so even if he's saying they don't have these rights, they don't have these rights.
It's before Wixon, it's before the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah,
I grant you that.
Totally changes the form here.
Yeah.
You know, but just to be clear, I don't want to make it. What Barnes is saying is right historically. If this is before these other cases, he's 100% right. That was the way it was. But also he's right because he's back then separate but equal was the law. So that just so everybody understands where we were at in American history.
Yeah.
the executive who gets to enforce it without judicial review. That's what the Supreme Court has said again and again and again and again and
That's
again.
what I was saying.
And the First Amendment rights are limited when you are here on a student visa. Remember, one way the Supreme Court put it was this way, because like the other big case on this is Harry-Cedes. And so in
That's
Harry
the case I
Cedes
brought up, Harry-Cedes.
But I want to be very, very clear though. He's not here on a visa. He's an LPR, and the court, and we saw that earlier, how the court made a distinction between visa holders and people who are LPRs, lawful residents or lawful permanent residents. So there is a distinction between the two.
I'm not sure. What was Harry-Cedes? So I had that. That was the case.
Gentleman
I had
who
brought
was
up here.
No, he's going to talk about it now. He's going to tell. He's going to tell us right now.
And there are a bunch of commies that came here in the teens and the 20s. Mm-hmm. And we passed laws in the 30s and 40s to say no commies. We're going to deport you if you're a commie. If you came in under the pretext that you were not a communist, and it turns out you are, we're going to deport you. And what the Supreme Court said is that law was just fine. You could deport people for simply being part of the communist group. It's a similar logic to the terror organization. It was considered support of violent overthrow of government was considered outside First Amendment protections. That's what the Supreme Court said in Harry-Cedes. Now, they would later modify that to imminent incitement of lawless action.
Brandenburg. So I was 100% correct. Y'all said I was incorrect.
I was
100% correct.
But this gives you some. But in the immigration context, they've long emphasized there's far fewer rights because it's a privilege to be here. And I mean, there are some, like in the Harry Bridges case that we talked about previously. Okay. There are some First Amendment speech protections for sure, but as it applies to deportation, is a different animal. Because what people are misreading about deportation is they think that that's a deprivation of property or liberty. It's not, according to the Supreme Court. They're like, you have no property interest in citizenship you weren't granted. You have no property interest in a visa you may have fraudulently obtained. And you have no liberty interest in it. It's not constitutionally recognized property or liberty.
Well, just to be clear, he's being very narrow in what he's talking about. Like, let's listen to the categories of things he's saying, because he's not just saying visas. He's saying very specific things. I'm gonna just run on the back. Listen to the categories.
You have no property interest. They're like, you have no of property or liberty. It's not, according to the Supreme Court. They're like, you have no property interest in citizenship you weren't granted. You have no property interest in a visa you may have fraudulently obtained.
A visa but that's not the situation we're at.
We're sort of dealing with the green card that may have been fraudulently obtained.
Because they just allege that, but that's after the
But that doesn't change the fact.
No. Well, before, because I was before they hadn't alleged that, but now they did. So that's what.
Let me ask you this.
Let
me ask you this. Fast forward 2 years from now, do you think he's still here? Or you think he's kicked out?
Yeah, I think he's going to still be here.
I think
the First Amendment. I think the First Amendment claim, if their removal action wasn't based on his speech, I think you'd be right. But since it is based on his speech, I think that gives some time. And what are we betting
on this? Because I think you're wrong. I think there's no way the Supreme Court. I think there's no.
I'm betting that he'll be here for probably another 2 years.
You think he will ultimately get?
I'm thinking he's going to. I'm thinking this is not.
Do you think he's going to win or lose at the Supreme Court level?
Was he going to win or lose? I don't know, because I can. So. I'm not arguing that he's going to win. My argument is that his case has validity. So in terms of the outcome, whether he's going to win or lose, I'm honestly 50-50. Half of me believes that he does have a viable First Amendment issue, the speech, for instance. But the other part of me is that not all speech is protected, even with citizens. And since not all speech is protected, I can see a court saying the speech that you're saying now is not protected speech based in these circumstances, and the government can remove you. So I can see both ways. So I would say 50-50. It all depends on the judges. Now, if it gets up to the Supreme Court, if you got a couple of free speech absolutists up there, I think they're going to vote to be
gun to your head, speech. Nate. Gun to your head.
Yeah, I would say no then, because First Amendment. No, I think he's going to. I think he'll go. If you put a gun in my head, I think he's going to go, and that's because I think I think it's hard to get a First Amendment win. Or
someone, there's a viral clip going around on the internet of someone saying this is an area where the government powers are at their zenith and First Amendment rights are at their nadir.
No, that's not. But because that's all. All right, so it all, the government powers at its zenith. It's only at the border. That's when you're trying to come in. It's their powers are at their zenith.
Their powers over immigration, their powers over foreign policy,
at its zenith. But
are
when
at its zenith and the least judicial permissible review.
Correct. No doubt about that. That's 100% correct. But we're talking about in country, and we don't have that issue. He's already been let in. And I like to try to let people know this is like a driver's license. They issue a driver's license. They can take that driver's license back essentially for any reason. It's a privilege, but obviously, so that's kind of how I consider the green card, essentially like a driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And you have no liberty interest in it. It's not constitutionally recognized property or liberty interest subject to due process to begin with, because it's a privilege to even be here. Kicking a trespasser out of your land, out of your property, has never required a judge to approve it in advance. So that's the issues. And in fact,
that's on the trend that Arago is.
Yeah, but kicking a trespasser off, yes, that does need due process. That's true, except if you like in some places they had squatters' rights. So it does become so at some points it can be. So
that's not talking about LPRs, that's talking about illegal aliens.
Oh, no, I'm talking about, but even illegal aliens, squatters. I'm talking about he's saying if you can't, in all this, if somebody trespass on your property, you can just kick them off without police. And that's not true. Eventually, like even in New York City, remember 30 days if somebody lived in your house, you couldn't even kick them out. Or you would get arrested.
Nothing in the structure of our government or the text of our Constitution would warrant judicial review by standards which would require us to equate our political judgment with that of Congress in the context of immigration. Okay. The policy towards aliens is so exclusively entrusted to the political branches of the government as to be largely immune from judicial inquiry or interference. The government's power of deportation is not punishment, and it would be rash and irresponsible to reinterpret it as such. And then what Justice Frankfurter said in the
this is why, by the way,
immigration
this is
policy,
why, pause for a second. This is why when I hear you or Nate talking about having to meet a compelling need and narrowly tailored, I'm like, that's not what's applying here. That's what we think of when we talk about a traditional First Amendment case, and that's not what we're dealing with here. It's not this standard strict scrutiny yardstick that they have to overcome. And that's where I think a lot of people, when you try invoking that First Amendment protections apply here, because Rubio said he was supporting Hamas, and that's why. I think it's a misread as to how the law works here.
Well, let's just be clear. We all agree in the hierarchy, the Constitution is higher than any statute, right? If statute and Constitution conflict.
Yes.
So right now, they're saying there's a statute, but you can't look at the constitutional issue, and I just think that's just not the way it works. I think the constitutional issue, if they're violating this person's rights, his constitutional rights, that statute must give way to the Constitution. The way
the Constitution has been interpreted in the course of immigration law has not been to take your traditional First Amendment review of how they deal with illegal aliens. And I understand that Bridges v. Wixon implies that they have some sort of First Amendment rights. I recognize that is the nail in the wall that every defender of Khalil is fixating on. What I'm saying is it's not the same type of rights, and I think it's taken so out of context that it's almost as if by your argument, you can almost take a read that any time someone opens their mouth, it's like now, because they open their mouth and says something truly offensive, then now they're insulated from being deported, because they can say, well, you just don't like what I said. You just disagree with me. Someone gets up, somebody's being deported, and they get up and make a speech about how they hate black people or Jews or Muslims, and they want them all to die. And then the court and the government says, we want this person out of here, all of a sudden now this becomes some First Amendment thing, that because he said that, irrespective of the fact that there might be a dozen other reasons to get rid of him, but because he said those words, now we have to have this whole Megillah. We have to go through all these hurdles because he was offensive. That's what I'm saying is you're enabling the First Amendment, and the way you're looking at it is you're almost allowing the First Amendment to become this sword, which would pierce through the normal protective sphere that is the exclusive domain of the government, as opposed to recognizing that the First Amendment is designed to shield you from the government. And I understand you'll counter me and say, because Rubio talked about speech, that's what makes it now that the First Amendment is working as a shield rather than as a sword. I understand. I heard you on that. I understand that. I'm simply saying that it seems as if it's being used as a sword rather than as a shield. I think we're getting to a place where at least I think we're starting to understand where the other person's coming from.
I don't know, because it's like there were like a whole bunch of things you said that it made me think that I don't think you understand my position as I was hoping you did. But I'll say this: we're getting closer, because you keep making the analogy that anytime someone opens up their mouth, and I'll say it. Listen, I was as a law school professor, I'm never going to say that. Why? Because freedom of speech is not about speech; it's about communicating some idea, some message. For instance, there are multiple cases where strippers have gotten First Amendment protections because their message happens to be an exotic message. It's like 4 or 5 cases with strippers doing it. So you don't even have to speak. You can just give in an exotic message. So what I'm saying is that if in this particular case, if there is another reason, like in the Reno case, and I think Reno is on point in this way. In Reno, we had the same circumstances. We had visa holders who had not only overstayed their visa, which is a violation, but they also claimed the same First Amendment protections. Hey, they're targeting us for First Amendment protections. The court said, well, the First Amendment protections we're not going to deal with because you have legit visa issues. You overstayed your visa. We can't review that because it's right there. That's for the administrative judge. They can review it. You overstayed your visa, gone. Now, I'll put that into this case with this guy. If they find he overstayed his visa, he committed fraud in his thing, he's gone. He's got no First Amendment claim. But the thing that's got him the First Amendment claim is that they're not saying that. They're saying that it was speech in particular that opens the door for that. That's my point. My point is the door for the First Amendment argument wasn't opened up by the defendant in this case. It was opened up by the government to make the argument. So you are correct. It is not so when you say something like, if you could do this, because you literally said it's if you say anything, but you also said no matter what the other reasons are. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying if there are other valid reasons, he's going to be gone. Leaf lawfully, he would be gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Perhaps I didn't. I understood what you were saying, and I understood that you were saying it's the government by saying this speech is why we're getting rid of him that now turns it into a First Amendment issue.
And they could have said anything else. They could have literally said anything else, and we wouldn't be talking about speech.
That was where I had my whole counter that they weren't talking about the content of his speech. They were talking about the fact that he was making speech.
Exactly.
And so it's not attacking the nature of it. It's not attacking his expression of speech. It's the fact that he's making speeches.
And then even with that, I'll ask you, like, even with that, who determines if that speech is protected now? Because now you have a legal question. Is that speech protected? And that's what the habeas petition is for. Is my speech protected? Yes or no? It has nothing to do with the immigration issue.
No. It has everything to do with it, because it has to do with the fact is, can a government say, is the government empowered to say that if you're making speeches, irrespective of what the content is, that we're allowed to get rid of you because it's affecting our national policy?
Yes.
And I think that it makes logical sense to say that they can. I think it's kind of illogical to say that they can't, because you are here at the discretion of the sovereign.
Well, so I'll ask you this.
You're dumping on my rug, even if you're saying really nice things, even if you're saying love your neighbor, be good to everyone, but in one way or another, it's dumping on my rug. even though you may not be trying
saying,
to, but it is.
So it's almost like you're saying that if any speech, no matter what it is, no matter what the speech, friendly speech, you've made a whole. Matter of fact, most of your analogies have been any type of crazy speech. No matter what the speech is, if the Secretary of State says that speech, no matter what it is, affects foreign policy, then we can deport you.
Yes.
And
by the way,
no
if you actually review the statute, that was my point. He doesn't even have to make a speech. He could be in a coma, and they can say his presence here is affecting foreign policy. That's my point. It doesn't have to be. In this case, they say it's the fact that he's making speeches, which is what's affecting our foreign policy. But that was. I think now you're starting to really understand my point. It's so broad and so discretionary. And you can ask, well, how is that fair? What about Wixon? What about Bridgens v. Wixon? That doesn't make any sense. He has a freedom of speech. It's that we don't even get into whether his First Amendment rights are. It's that you're here at the discretion of the sovereign, and the statutes enable the sovereign to say, get out of here, and it's not considered punishment. We're not punishing you. We're just saying, get out of here because we need you gone.
Yeah, the punishment thing is a red herring, right?
It's not a red herring.
Well, because it doesn't have to. Punishment is for criminal stuff, and you could have civil stuff that's non-punishment. That's even mundane.
Because I'll tell you why that's relevant. It's relevant because if it were punishment, that would open up a doorway into saying this is a First Amendment violation.
But the thing is,
the fact that it's not a punishment is what protects this action from being deemed a First Amendment violation.
No, because you can a building permit. Like there's other things you can do, and they say because you said this, we're not going to give you the permit, and that would be the violation too. So it doesn't have to be a punishment, and you don't have for a driver's license, and you don't have a right to a driver's license. The argument that you're making is that the statute essentially trumps the Constitution in terms of it. The statute says because you're an alien, we can do that. We can remove you no matter what. If your speech, any speech, affects policy, I think that's. I honestly think the Constitution oversteps the statute, and I think if the Constitution says that you can't, the government shall make no laws abridging speech, and that law abridges speech, then that law is no good. As it's applied in this situation.
I have one more question before we move back to them. And do you think that conceptually makes sense to say that whatever standards you had to be held to gain admission, you have to maintain while you're here in our country? That's implied in the admission slip that we give you, be it a visa or green card, that it's implied that you're going to maintain. You're not going to step back into being a worse participant in our community after you get stamped approved for a visa, approved for a green card. Does that make sense?
That would make sense, yeah.
So if that's inherent,
you can't commit crimes.
If that's inherent, if that's inherent in a green card or in a visa, would it make sense to say that, hey, we have a right to deport you? Because now what we're seeing in you is that what you said in your green card application is not true, or is maybe it once was true, but it's no longer true. So now we have a right to get rid of you.
See, that's not a disagreement. I agree with that 1,000,000%. What you just said is.
But why would you not say that's a First Amendment? That's now First Amendment scrutiny.
Your example just now was not a First Amendment issue.
Why? No, because you're not allowed to express sympathy for terrorists.
Okay.
If you're going to come in here, that's expressed in the INA. If you express support for terrorists to get in here, but then now you now you got your visa. Yay! You come into the country, and you even get your green card. Now you start expressing sympathy for terrorists at that point.
Okay.
Do you think that the government retains a right to throw you out, saying, "Hey, if you had done all these things before we gave you your access, we wouldn't have given it to you. Now you're doing it after giving you access, we can remove that from you." Do you think that's true or not true in the light of Bridges v. Wixon?
In light of Bridges v. Wixon, probably not, because if you're in, so you've given me three different analogies. One, the person committed fraud on the application.
No, he didn't commit fraud. Let's say he was telling the truth.
No, but I'm saying the different analogies you gave me, because I was
different problems Khalil specifically has.
Because in your first was explaining the issue, you first said there was a committed fraud on the thing, on his application, and I say yes. If the person committed fraud or whatever, kick them out. The second iteration was he said something and committed fraud, and I'm said okay, the speech we ignore because he had his technical violation is out. Now this third rendition seems to be the speech causes. I'm trying to understand now. The third iteration is that if there's any technical violation, the speech doesn't matter. I don't care about the speech because the technical violation. He has the violation of law. If he doesn't have that technical violation of law, and they're saying the speech is what caused it, then I think that triggers the First Amendment.
What technical violation are you referring to?
For instance, committed a crime. If he whatever, like there's rules that you have to follow. If you don't follow one of those rules, if you lied on one of your applications, one of those technical violations, then you can go. And if you say they're targeting you for free speech, that doesn't matter. You have to go.
So the area I disagree with you about is I think you're giving Bridges v. Wixon way broader impact than I think it's intending or it should be read as. Because I read Bridges v. Wixon as saying you cannot punish them anymore that for speech that they engage in any more than you would a citizen. And punishment means criminal punishment. So that's why I say if he had made those speeches and they tried prosecuting him for incitement, I would not say that, oh, he has a lesser standard than the Brandenburg standard because he's just an LPR, not a citizen. I think that under Bridges v. Wixon, he gets the exact same, he's held to the exact same difficult standard for the government to reach of proximal time and location. And accordingly, he cannot go to prison for the speeches that he gave. But because it's not a punishment to remove his green card, because that's not deemed a punishment, in that case, I think you can look at it as, okay, we're now looking at you as an individual who's not eligible for a green card, and you happen to have one, so we're taking your green card away. That's how I think it makes sense to look at it. But that's where I'm at on this. I want to start wrapping up this.
He has long been.
This thing.
Well, before I get out of here, my response to that is unfortunately, I think I'll close this up. I think my issue is that I think you're just reading it wrong. I think you're reading it wrong, and I think you're when you spoke about Wixon, and so what I did is I actually went and looked at all the cases that you guys cited and read through them. So I read through Wixon, I read through what's the other one? The other one that we've been citing.
I read through Wixon today.
Reno.
I read through Reno versus.
And I have also read through Reno.
I'll tell you, it's a boring as hell case to read.
Now in the Reno case, the facts are very, very similar to what we have here. Extremely similar to what we have here. But just so we're clear, the green card holders, the two green card holders in that particular case, they were said to have technical violations. The court said no, those minor technical violations didn't matter, and it also then the government let the First Amendment argument. So they're still here in Reno. They did the same exact thing even with the Palestinians. They are still here in Reno. Those green card holders are still here. They were not deported. Now, I would say I say in this particular case, the procedure is as follows. And it says it in the memorandum of law from the district court judge that I sent you. It straight up says that when the government arrests somebody and seizes them, they can then go to a district court where they've been seized and say, hey, listen, the government seized me illegally because they're violating my First Amendment rights. And then there's another Supreme Court case that is cited in the judge's opinion that stands for that proposition. That yes, if you, it's Rumsfeld v. Padilla, essentially giving you the right to challenge the fact if you're in custody. And that's what this person is doing. He's challenging the fact that's in custody. Now, Joe has made the argument that since it's not a contextual, they're not talking about the context of the speech, that this should not apply. I'm saying because the government has made speech the issue, then a First Amendment analysis by a district court judge on the constitutionality of the speech makes sense. Now, the INS judge actually can't really do that type of analysis because he's not an Article 3 judge. Article 3 judges gives constitutional pronouncements, even though Article 4 judges can do it. I mean, Article 2 judges, which they are, but this is an Article 3 judge. So at the end of the day, I'm saying that if the government cannot kick you out for any reason, cannot say just because your speech hurts foreign policy can kick them out, because just like with any First Amendment right, from speech to religion to your Second Amendment right to your rights against due process, to your Fourth Amendment right, to your Fifth Amendment right, to if you get arrested, how you get an attorney, all of those rights are afforded to non-citizens, and Wixom and all the precedent before it says it. And Yik Wo is the case that's actually on point, because Yik Wo is the one that starts all this stuff.
My friend, I appreciate you coming by here tonight.
Sorry about the long-winded thing, and I feel bad because I know the chat is like, we hate Nate, but they always hate me.
No, they haven't been expressing hate. Some of them have been saying you're wrong, but none of them have been expressing any personal animus. Anyway, always a pleasure banging heads with you, brother. I appreciate you coming by here.
Yeah, I'm getting out of here, get some rest. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it, bro.
My pleasure. Have a good night. Thank you. That was, wow, 2.5 hours of Nate. Uterus Thief says, maybe if we unlawfully take over more college campuses and block Jews specifically from accessing spaces and services they pay for and attack and chase them around, maybe that'll solve the problem. Yeah, maybe. Ooh, you never know. Where am I at here? Drop Out, who says U.S. citizen speech and special designation protections speech doesn't exist outside that bubble. That's true. Right. He also kidnapped a person on campus. So we got this one also. It was violent, not peaceful, thus not protected. But everyone points to the fact that the government never complained that it was violent. The amazing part of scores to come down against Trump on a couple of these cases exactly on this. It has to go through procedure first. I don't see how he's going to lose this one. I don't see it. Court will find jurisdiction whenever they feel like it, and they'll use Pontius Pilate. They'll use it like Pontius Pilate when they don't want to find it. Too true. Master Phillips hit me with 5. I missed who it is. But I hope each of you who were conferred special status, like citizenship-like status to this channel, you become a citizen of this channel, courtesy of Master Phillips. I hope that you express your gratitude to him, as well as Bella Stella, who hit me with another 10. Queen of Recruitment coming on in here, bringing another 10 members to the following. I do remind you, those of you who are new to the following, that I, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic, am merely a host. I am not the leader of the following. No. You're a member of the following, but I am not at all the leader of the following. Just a host. Say it with me. Joe is not the leader of the following. One of us. It's Cruel Bits in the back. One of us. I mean, not totally a cult. Not at all. A cult type. Totally not a cult type of cult. In the SeaWorld case, they argued habeas corpus. Admin should have done this closer to midterms. Dems supporting terrorists, loving aliens would not play well with the masses. There's still more. There's still more to come. There's a lot of people to get rid of. There's a lot more, but I agree with you. Like abortion, inside versus outside determines rights. True. If anything, the JFK files taught us that a lot of foreign agents come in under student visas. Student visas are a dangerous thing. I think there's some of these Ivy League institutions that have more student visa than American citizens, which is outrageous. It's outrageous. Allegan says LPR not guarantee renewal of citizenship. It's not a must issue. It's a may issue. Yep. It's true. A green card, I figure it'll be out after it's not renewed. Green cards are may issue. Wouldn't the implied effect of speech matter as much as the tone? You could say very politely, your head would look so pretty on my wall. You can guide this addition with flowery or noble wording. Yeah, my point is that even if his speech was something that was not ironic or meant in a sarcastic way, but that was just genuinely peaceable type speech, they still can remove him, saying we can't have you here because it's affecting our foreign policy. 1A does not negate all loyalty tests or standards of conduct. Even citizenship is not inviolable. We can apply loyalty or goodwill test to immigration. I wish we could do it to natural citizens, because a lot of these folks, I think, hate America. Not judged by the color of the skin, but the content of their character. Once again, we gain membership to channel. Joe cannot kick us out of the file when we call him names, which happens every show. I have so much I wanted to tell you guys about my visit to Tim Pool. I do want to express my gratitude. I don't expect he's ever going to see this, but I do want to express my gratitude to him for having me on there. I had a great time. I do want to tell you that Tim individually, as well as every member of his staff, was not simply polite, but helpful, courteous, just like doing everything possible to make the trip down there, my stay in the hotel, taken care of, like, unbelievably. Coordinating it, taking care of it, paying for it. Is very first class in the way they treat their guests. Very first class. I was very impressed with how well he takes care of his guests. They put me up in very comfortable accommodations, and like a half-hour ride from his place, which I'm obviously not going to give the location of. But and then so I'll give you. Should I give you the brief story as to what it was like being there? I'll give you the brief the breakdown. Should I do that now? Let me see. We got 7 out of 15. That's not good. That's not good. 7 out of 15. I really like Nate Eames wrong 60% of the time. I can't stand Pisco is wrong by just waking up in the morning, and I didn't notice he stole your glasses, Joe. I saw that. He doesn't have tortoiseshell. I have tortoiseshell. He has black. But I saw that the style of the frame was exactly the same, and I was just like, that's new. That's new. I think that's new. I saw that also. I was like, okay, all right. Next Joe Rogan podcast. It's overdue, isn't it? I think so. So I will tell you that I was put up in a hotel. So give you the rundown here. I sort of was like I asked his booking agent if it's considered rude for me to talk about the behind the scenes stuff. It's like it's like a private conversations I'm having, even though there was nothing private. He's not sharing. Tim Pool wasn't sharing any of his personal stories. It was really just hanging out with him before the show and sort of joking around with him. So I was like, I don't know if like that's considered like rude for me to just sort of like even not. It was only good. It was only like fun. I will tell you this. I'll share with you one thing. I never heard back from her. I don't know if she so I was like, I asked him if it's cool for me to just like sort of share behind the scenes stuff of what happened there, because I'm sure my audience would enjoy it. Let me see if I heard back. No, I haven't heard back. All right, so I'll hold back some of it, but I'll tell you the first exchange I ever had in my life with Tim Pool. My first exchange in my life with Tim Pool was, so first and foremost, no one there realized it, but the guy who works as camera guy looks so much like freaking Tim Pool that like when I walked into his studio, I was like, "Hey Tim," and it wasn't Tim. But I don't think he realized I was calling him Tim Pool. I don't think he realized that. And it was like, I was like, wait, that's not Tim. Like I was wearing my glasses even, and it still looked like Tim Pool to me. I was like, wow, he looks slightly different in person. It was not same beanie, everything, same facial hair. This guy was a little more unkempt than Tim. But And like a second later, like he stood up and like, "Hey, it's Kevin. Hey, I'm Kevin." You know, and like I was like, "Oh, good luck." Like it's almost like he ignored the fact that I said "Hey, Tim" to him, which I like sort of was. I was embarrassed, and I was like, when no one realized what I just did, so that's okay, I guess. I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, that was classic boomer moment. The other thing I'll share with you is this. So I went out of the studio, and he has a really nice studio there, big table, but the seats are far apart from each other. The reason you always see people like looking off like this, or the whole time I was looking like this, is so Tim was to my right, my left, and like the next chair over, but the next chair is like 8 feet away from me. Big, massive oak table in the middle there, with this very cool spaceship thing hovering in the middle of it. And Pisco's sitting across from me, and the guy controlling the camera is over here. And then behind the guy controlling the camera is a big screen where when he pulls stuff up on screen, so that's why I didn't even realize it until the second time he pulled stuff up, that he was like, that because he's looking at his monitor here, but there actually is a big screen that's up to my right. So you can actually see late in the show where I was like, when he was reading from something, where I was like trying to read it along with him. The very first exchange I had with Tim Pool, I just sort of, as like when I came out of the studio, and he has like a little section there which has like a bar and sort of like a lounge room, and so he was behind the bar, and he has like this little model thing which looks like steps, like a little staircase that's like this big, like a miniature staircase with like a rail. And he had this little skateboard, and he was like flipping it. You know how skateboarders will like ride sideways on a skateboard down a rail? So he was like doing that with his fingers and trying to like flip it over with his fingers and like sort of practicing that, like sort of like fidgeting. Like that was what he was doing. And so I came over and I shook hands with him, and I had to pass by him, to go to use his bathroom. So his bathroom has a toilet that I've never seen anything like this before. I've never seen anything like this before. I walk in there, turn the lights on, and I kid you not, close the door, lock the door, turn the lights on, close the door, lock the door. I look around and I'm like, where's the toilet? I don't see no toilet here. Ain't no freaking toilet. There's no toilet here. What the heck is this? Where the heck is the toilet? And I see on the floor, it looks like a black chest that's like about 2.5 feet high. And it looks like not like a cube, because a cube would be perfect square, but like a rectangle, like a chest, like a trunk. And I see it looks like there's a slit in it. So I lift up, and it's like the seat pulls back and like reveals the toilet. And there's all these different buttons on the wall where it's like it has all these different options for flush, heating the seats, bidet, a different type of wash for your tush. And I was just like, what the heck is this? Like I was like sort of like I was like nervous by like pressing like different buttons. And anyway, so 30 seconds. So I was just like sort of like trying a couple of buttons there. And I was like, this is pretty cool. I'd never seen anything like this. I finished my business, flush, and leave. And I come out there, and a bunch of people who work for him were basically all hanging there in the lounge. And it's like the first actual words I said to Tim Pool was I said, I feel like I just went to the bathroom in the future. So they all started laughing. And And one of them commented and said, "That's really not the most modern toilet. They have AI toilets now." So the and I was like even trying to picture. I don't even know what the heck that means. It's like people have been doing their business a lot of, there's not a lot of inventiveness you need for like AI, right? I mean, it's not so. So I said, so I was like, really AI test? Like, they're like, yeah. So I said, I guess you'd be like, Siri, wash my ass, and they just fell over laughing. Hey Siri, wash my. What are you supposed to just? What would you say to a toilet? Siri, wash my ass. So there you go. There you go. Anyway, I hung out with him. I hung out with him for like another like 5-10 minutes. I was very pleased that I was able to like basically start off with like a pretty good joke. So yeah. Anyhow, but every one of them was, like I said, very professional. Maybe in the future on locals, I'll go into like a little bit more detail. I got to meet Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, in the morning in the hotel. And that was actually very cool. And I spent like 10 minutes talking to him. That was very cool. I'll probably share that on locals later this week. I sort of want to like, it's not like there's anything, if you're expecting that I'm going to share like anything embarrassing about Tim or anything like that, A, if anything embarrassing had happened, I wouldn't share it irrespective of his permission or not. Or B, nothing like that, nothing of the kind actually happened. He was a very gracious host. He was very cool. And I will tell you this, after we finished, he was very ebullient in his praise of both me and Pisco. He seemed very pleased with the show, with the way it went, with the audience, with the nature of the discussion, with the dialogue, the back and forth, and how everything, just the whole show overall. He was obviously very pleased with it. He did say that he's like, I'll have you on Timcast IRL anytime. He said, I'll have either of you on Timcast IRL anytime you want. And I was like, cool, I'd love that. And he was even talking about other projects that he has in the works, which as it happens, they're on Saturday. Like first I was like, I would love to do that. And I was like, wait, are these on Saturday? He's like, oh yeah. I was like, crap. Damn it. But yeah, I felt like it was a very positive step because he seems like a genuinely good guy. He really does. Seems like a genuinely good guy. And that's what I told Ron Coleman, and he goes, he is. He's just genuinely a good guy. And obviously very smart guy. And yeah, it was as good an experience as I could have hoped for. Overall, everything about the experience was as good an experience as I could have possibly hoped for. And I have nothing but high praise to say about Tim Pool and everyone who I met who works for him. So yeah, overall, and the whole experience, like I said, Pisco and I really were at each other's throats, but not like in a sense where like I ever felt like I wanted to punch him. It's just I would just be like, oh my God. It's almost like when I'm talking to Nate, like this last 2 hours. I'm like, how do you not hear what I'm saying? Like, am I not expressing myself? Like, am I not? It's the only difference is when the cameras are off. When I'm talking to Pisco, he's less determined to look like he's winning the argument. He's every bit as aggressive, doesn't give an inch, but he won't be cutting me off the way he does when the cameras are on. And that's why I think at one point I was like, I know you're trying to get your viral moment or whatever. I'm pretty sure I sort of threw that at him at one point. Because I'm just like, stop playing for the camera. Stop mugging for the camera that you're like, oh, look at me beating up on this conservative lawyer with like cutting me off. I was like, this is ridiculous. But yeah. But as far as like actually believing the crap he says, Pisco really believes the crap he says. Most of it. Some of the stuff he's written on X, I still don't think he actually really believes it. Or he speaks hyperbole for the sake of clicks, which is unfortunate. But I will say this: he's definitely not a stupid man. I just think that I think Trump has broken his brain. I think Trump has really broken his brain. He sort of, there was a tell when he at the end there called Trump deranged. It's like, I think he just waved the white flag that no one really realizes. Trump is deranged. So that was yeah, but overall I felt as if like I built it was a very healthy first step towards building like a continuing relationship with Tim Pool and his staff. So yeah, and I think it's mutually beneficial. Now there was a point there during the course of the debate where Ron Coleman asked me if I went to the bathroom for a half hour. So one of the things I'll point out to you is this. When I'm sitting there with Tim Pool, so the first hour there of the conversation went for 2 hours and 15 minutes. The first hour there was mostly me versus Pisco. Pisco is going to end up talking 50% of the time because it's like his position is antagonistic to position. Tim and I are like 85% on the same page, where I'm going to be bringing in more of the legal element behind it. He's more of a cultural type of perspective, or like what his libertarian perspective is. I'm not sure how he identifies politically, but along those lines, as far as like what he thinks reality is. And it's his show. So when he starts engaging back and forth with Pisco, he's not going to be engaging back and forth with me because he has nothing to argue about with me. So Pisco's going to end up talking 50% of the time. And the question is that other 50% of the time, who's engaging with him? And I'm definitely not going to be interceding in a back and forth dialogue that they're having, especially because some of the topics that they were talking about, I was just like, I don't even know how we got here. All of a sudden, we're talking about trans women in women's prisons and the attack on St. John's, and I'm just like, we're just jumping everywhere here. And I came in here really fixated on this, and I'm like, all right, look, this is where he wants to go. I'll let him go there, you know. But so I was like, I didn't feel like I was in a position where it's like, it just seemed as if, you know, Tim wanted to engage Pisco about these topics because he was, you know, he sort of felt a certain way about the way Pisco was saying things and finding inconsistencies. It starts with him basically asking about the Second Amendment rights or potential Second Amendment rights of aliens. And then it just started jumping to all sorts of different branches of civil liberties. And I was like, and it felt as if Tim wanted to basically, you know, go at Pisco on it. So I was like, all right, you know, it's not a crazy development for the show to take, and he knows what he wants in his show. At a certain point, I was like, all right, I think I need to remind people. I was like, all right, let's come back from our snack. Let's start getting back involved here. So I sort of jumped in, but there was a lengthy period there where I was just like, all right, you guys do your thing. So, but as far as how the overall show went, he definitely clipped a bunch of good moments in me, which I like. That gets me more exposure. So you know, all the more so, and you know, with some nice complimentary things like, you know, conservative breaking down liberal lawyer kind of thing or whatever, or conservative lawyer rants at liberal, which, yeah, that's everything about it. Everything about the experience from soup to nuts. Managed to get me back home in time for Shabbos. Thank God for great work by his booking agent, and especially the driver who was driving like a crazy person to make sure we caught the train, which we did. Everything about their staff, grade A, top of the line, amazing people. Love them all. Really look forward to working with Tim in the future. Very pleased that he seems very inclined to working with me again. And I already have been in touch with his staff about potentially coming back on Timcast IRL sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Depends on their schedule and my schedule, but we'll see. So that's my general synopsis. I have a few more details that I'll probably save for locals. But yeah, it was an awesome experience. So anything else I got? Anything else I got for you guys? Let me just catch up my end stuff here. Did Tim have kosher food for me? I didn't ask him to provide kosher food for me. It's not like I was eating by him. I asked him to fly me in the evening before. So I brought tons of kosher food from home. And the breakfast, so when a hotel gives breakfast, there's invariably going to be some kosher food there. Not the food that the hotel is preparing themselves. That's never kosher. But I'm saying is the prepackaged stuff, like yogurts or raw fruits and things of that nature, or milk. So these are things that in America, they're invariably going to be kosher. So, and there's enough there that I brought with me some grapefruits and some fish, and yeah, I was not hungry at all. So I was so nervous about it. I was like, I don't know how this thing works. Joe, but district judges can review core exec presidential power. Why can't they review a congressional act that would limit their jurisdiction? There seems to be no bounds on what the judicial branch thinks they can do. Do they offer you seashells? No, Joe, it's Siri wet my ass. Toilets in Japan have play music buttons unrelated, but Sargon's a gamer. Do you think he has played Ace Attorney? Very unrelated to anything that's ever been said by any person. I never asked him. I did talk to him about him coming on the show. I spent 10 minutes talking to him about he didn't recognize me at first, even though he follows me on X. Like we follow each other, and I had talked to him about a year ago about the idea of him coming on the show, but the time zone issues were really screwing everything up. But yeah, he was a very impressive individual. If Lady Lawgic was with you, would she have loved? She would love the toilet. Women love heated seats and wash function. I actually asked her that. She actually said she's not a fan of that. I caught the clip related to the First Amendment student visas. You aced that. Pisco just creates strawman arguments that have no grip on reality. See, this is what he did. Like every time I started getting the word he loved to use, purchase, and I started really making headway in an argument, he's like, but would you say this? But like he cut me off in the middle and try to go into a different thing. Or like another time he's like, you're saying this, but I saw Tim was nodding his head at what I was saying before. You were nodding your head. Weren't you nodding your head? It's like, who gives a damn? Address the point I'm bringing up here. It's like, how is that relevant? He's like, Joe, you have to admit that what Tim just said, he's like trying to play us off each other. You have to admit what Tim just said was crazy. So I was like, Tim was expressing a moral perspective, not a legal opinion. I just felt as if he's trying so hard to pivot into a win. Give me the win here. Give me the win here. Give me the win here. It was, and that's what I think was a lot of people found grating. His fans seem to love it because, and I can understand why his fans love it, because they're used to basically seeing their libtard debaters get wrung out and destroyed. So if they go into a ring and don't look as clearly decimated, but they don't look like they're beaten to and punch drunk by the end of it, they feel as if that's a massive win. But the reality is, he wasn't making points. He was doing a great deal of deflecting. And some of it was gaslighting, like when he was bringing up, these cases. Maybe he was talking about the Wing 1 case. I don't even know that Barnes was bringing up. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I'm just going to keep plowing ahead with my points. And I did get aggravated when he started saying Trump doesn't respect the Constitution. I was the first thought out of my head was F you. You don't know the first damn thing about what Trump actually cares about and doesn't care about. You're just going to say whatever you think feeds your audience, the stupid mindset of your audience, which never understood Trump, even when he's crystal clear, and will always look to misinterpret him and have ridiculous framing about what he's saying. What good Jew does not interject at everything is why Ron is asked to take a piss break. Maybe. At one point during Tim and Pisco's back and forth, the camera showed an empty chair. Then you laughed so hard. Oh, I don't know why it showed that. I wasn't laughing at that. That's just a weird thing. I never was laughing about like thinking that like it's like I'm not here. But much worse sitting on a. Yes, I would find that unsettling. Also, it's like, wait, am I feeling someone else's warmth here? Is that what I'm feeling? But I guess if you know the seats are heated, I guess if you know that. Anyway, so yeah, and the reason I was a little hesitant about it is because I'll tell you this: I assume that Tim Pool has a great deal of money. He was very, very down to earth. He was very, very down to earth. He did not act like a guy who has money. He was just like very natural and normal. So. Anyway, it was very cool hanging out with him and his crew. They were all awesome. Congratulations, Joe. I'm looking forward to more Tim Pool collaborations. Next time you visit Tim, try to carve out some skateboarding time with him. I'll save that for locals. I'll save that. I'll save that. That's what I'm saying for locals. So I'll save that part of it for locals. Something I gotta save. Fan says law review on topic. Law review on topic. Really. That's a very short article. It's a very short article, but thank you, fans. Sam Cedar said he broke Tim's toilet on Live Culture War. That's what Mitch DeWitt said in Locals. That's what my digger is saying. Sam Cedar said he broke Tim's toilet on Live Culture War. I was terrified of that. I was terrified. I was like, there's like 7 different buttons built into the wall there. It's not part of the toilet. It's built into the wall. You press, and there's like a flush button, and the thing a second later flushes. And I was just like, and then there's like one with like a picture of water hitting a touch. I was just like, I don't want to know. I'm definitely not trying that right now. I'm going on the air. I'm going on the air in 3 minutes. I'm not going to be having water dripping from my butt. All leftists, the university says, all leftists care about is perception of a win, not the truth or an actual win. They value the perceived win. Watch for that pattern. It aligns with the values of virtue signals, not upheld virtues. Agree with that totally. Nate thinks rescinding green card is the same as arrests. Yeah, it's he seems to attribute no significance to the fact that the Supreme Court says it's not punishment, and I think it's actually highly significant. He said in his live last night, which I only watched like 10 minutes of, that he's actively trying to rally you and pit you and Tim against each other. Oh, is that what he said? I'm not surprised, because, and not once did we go for debates. But he was definitely doing that. He's like, hey, you would have to agree that what he said there is crazy. And I was just like, why? No, he's expressing moral opinion. Nothing about that was crazy. I do have a question. Would you guys want me to rewatch the whole thing and go through it with you? I wouldn't redo the part which I wasn't actively involved in. I'll put that as a poll. Start a poll. And I'm and I'm basically putting this poll yes on YouTube/Rumble. Yes on, but only on locals. Or no. It would probably take me a long time to do this. I'm checking the Rumble chat. You guys want me to do it? I'm seeing yes, yes. One says locals. Seeing a few yeses. Seeing a few yeses on Rumble. Ruben saying that would be awesome. A lot of you are thinking that. I gotta figure out when I would do that. April 1st is the start of the Karen Reed trial, which I was thinking of live streaming. That was the next project, and that's going to be like a daily thing, like streaming the Karen Reed trial, which I actually like the fact that I missed the first one. So for me, I'm going to be like a new juror, like a lawyer in the jury box who hasn't followed this case yet, and I'm going to sit in on the Karen Reed trial and just start streaming that thing. I plan on streaming the Karen Reed trial. I know nothing about this case. So I feel like I can come in there with fresh eyes and just be like, okay, let's hear what the state says. Let's hear what the defense says. Like, I'm a juror with you who happens to understand the law. That's how I'm approaching this. That's how I'm approaching this. Let me see what the early returns of my vote is. Ooh, this is tough. 2-1. 8% saying yes, only on locals. That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm new perspective, Allegan. I feel like I'm adding a new perspective. And I have no pro Karen Reed, anti Karen Reed sentiment. I just have like, I'm going to be coming in there. Let me see what the state's got. Let me see what the defense got. And I'll be able to give you my feeling for like I really don't care at all if she's acquitted or convicted. Yes, please do it here. So we're using against Pisco and locals just stays local. Mitch Jewitz saying in Digger's chat. Also, Tim Cassarel definitely needs more law tubers. If you could come and buy monthly regular, which has happened with guests in the past, that would be amazing. That's what I'd like to have happen. I'd like it to be like, oh yeah, we have here Joe, aka Good Logic, where it's like the audience knows me as like, oh yeah, it's Good Logic's in here. I want that. I would love to develop a relationship where I'm like a regular there. So that's, and I feel as if this was definitely a strong step in that direction. The guy was literally asking if I'm really interested in joining him on a new project that he's doing, where he's having lawyers like debate, which you'll probably all hear about soon. So, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm down. And then we were like talking about it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, this sounds awesome. And then I was like, wait, are these on Saturday? He's like, ah. And then he's like, look, that's the only time we get the venue. I'm sorry. So I was like, I wasn't thinking you were anti-Semitic. It just sucks. Start laughing. But he actually like said, like I said, look, maybe when you're looking at your venues, like after the first go round, if you can start setting stuff up for Sundays, I'll definitely join you. And he said, look into it. So what I'm saying is, I feel like I legitimately made a significant impression on him, of the kind that I was hoping to make. So all in all, I was very, very pleased with it, and I'm really hopeful to work with him more in the future. When you learn to use squatting toilet, I'll be impressed. Travel in Asia. No, that's not a life aspiration. He was so proud of that you'd agree line because you had to admit it was crazy or risk not being invited back, and love putting you in that spot. And given that, I gave the perfect answer, which is he's giving a moral opinion. I gave the perfect answer. He met his match in me. He met his match in me. Adrian, did I not handle it right? It was such a stupid question. I felt as if it's like, no, Daddy agrees with me. Daddy was nodding at what I was saying. It's just like, what the hell is happening here? It's like, oh yeah, you see, that's a win. His audience like, yeah, that's a win. He said Daddy agrees with him. I was just like, what is happening here? What's happening? What's happening? All right, where's my poll at? My poll is 25% saying no, 68% saying yes, and 6% saying yes on locals. I don't know what the hell to do with that. I don't know what to do with that. What I'll probably end up doing is I'm probably gonna end up doing it on YouTube. That's what I'm gonna see. This is the plan. Okay, this is the current plan, subject to change at a whim. I'm being real with you. It's subject to change at a whim. The current plan is that tomorrow I'll start by covering the news and spend the second half of my show going through like the first half of my debate on Tim Pool and maybe the last 10 minutes. And my debate with Pisco on Tim Pool. So this way, I know that going through that hour is probably going to end up taking me like 2 hours. I'll probably try to cover the news early and do that for the first half hour, 45 minutes, then go like for another like 2 hours going through the rest of it. You guys better be active in the super chats. I'm going to be working hard. I was working my tail up with these guys tonight. Oh my God, everyone's a critic. Everyone's a critic. I'm walking into it. I started off by saying I literally never opened Section 8 of the United States Code in my life before Khalil was arrested. I'm sitting here trying to catch up in this area law, that area law. I don't hold back in telling you where my shortcomings as a lawyer are. And I was just like, Jesus. Of all the areas for Tim Pool to say, hey, I need a lawyer to come in here and argue against another lawyer, it's like, yeah, let's pick something that Joe never heard of until 3 weeks ago. And I'm sitting here trying to read the APA and the procedure. And I'm sitting there just cracking my brain on one of the most complex areas of law. It's like imagine I told you, hey, you got 2 weeks, learn the tax code, and then debate another attorney about the tax code. Oh, he happens to be an attorney who practices in this area of law. Go ahead and go. Also, go in front of a national audience, which is like, I don't know, 15 times the size of like what you're normally talking in front of. And go hang out there and make sure you don't make an ass of yourself or look like an idiot. That's why I was like, I spent all last week. I was like, oh my God, I have so much homework to do. So much crap to memorize. 1252G, 1225, 8 USC, 1152. Oh, and they also changed it. Apparently, immigration law. Like I spent like 2.5 days like studying up. I was like, okay, I think I got this. And it was like, And then obviously all the rules changed in 2005 when they changed the immigration code. I'm like, no! Ever since Real ID was implemented in 2005, and everything about the immigration code, about our policy and procedure, is completely different now. Just like, oh God, there's so many different statuses and different procedures, and who has rights and powers and case law, and I was just like, oh my God. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention, my mouse has this button here, which basically is like, in case you want to delete everything you're doing during a stream, just hit this button that's conveniently right by your thumb. It's this button here. I'm going to show you. See this? See this? Right over here. This button right here. Actually, I'm not even sure if it's this button or this button, but one of these two buttons, if I hit it with my thumb, yep, I just bounce out of the stream. I don't know why. I don't know why they would invent a bounce out of your own stream button, but it's there. So if I make it through a stream without ever bouncing myself out, you should be like, wow, good job, Joe. Good job. Santiago Space Outlaw says, Joe, you sound like me fixing an air conditioner. Now I know more than the local AC guy. Yeah, maybe, eventually. But I didn't have a lot of time to learn. I had a lot of time to learn. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I did answer well. There you go. Dude, as far as you are, as you're on Culture War, your mama dresses you funny. As far as your appearance on Culture War, your mama dresses you funny. That's what it felt like. I'm surprised he didn't throw that at me. Squatting toilet check locals. It is a skill. Thank you. And thank you, Granola Grin. I'm getting close to landing my plane here in case that wasn't clear. Okay. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this. That's freaking insane. That's a squatting toilet? Why? Why would they do that? Why? That's a squat. Why? Why would that be a thing? Why would that be a thing? That's insanity. That's crazy. All right. I think it's time. I think it's time that I call it a night. We're 3 hours and 20 minutes in. So, you know what they say. Lab meat is for they, them. It's definitely not for you. Not for you. So, in case you ever see a commercial which says, hey, have you tried any lab meat recently? Have you tried it? No, it's for they, them. It's not for you. And also, do not, under any circumstances, eat the bugs. Don't do it. Don't eat the bugs. Don't eat the bugs. Don't eat the bugs. Don't do it. I thank you all for joining me. God willing, I'll see you all tomorrow. Where I'll cover the news and any developments that are happening in the world, as well as hopefully do somewhat a review of my appearance on Tim Pool. That's tomorrow night, starting at 10, and who knows, maybe even earlier. You don't know. You don't know. Wednesday, Tuesday, tomorrow's Monday. Tuesday, we start the Karen Reed trial. Oh my God, so much. Joey's going to be a busy boy. make sure that you tune in over here for the Karen Reed trial, because when I watch a trial, it's not the same as when anyone else is watching a trial. You know it. You don't want to miss it. That's going to start Tuesday, Karen Reed trial. Till then, good night. Go on speed.